Just let me know when you're ready. Okay, thank you very much. So this is the Children and Young People Committee, and thanks everyone for attending today. Just a brief statement on the protocols we'll follow. So this is a remote meeting and it's live broadcast on YouTube, and a recording will be available for public viewing following the meeting. Members, please mute their microphone throughout the meeting when not speaking, as it helps to ensure the quality of the audio for everybody. And you can switch your microphone on when speaking and then off when you've finished. If you use your raised hand button to indicate you wish to speak at any point, could officers introduce themselves by confirming their name and role before speaking for the first time on any item? And if any member loses connection, which we've all maybe had a wee problem with that today, or any technical issues during the meeting, you could alert the clerk as soon as possible using either the chat function or the phone or email. I'll now ask the clerk to do a roll call of the members present. David.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll just confirm the members present today. Councillor Barrow.
Present.
Councillor Brisley.
Present.
Councillor Earl.
Present.
Councillor Farmer.
Present.
Councillor Dodds.
Present. I'm substituting for Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you. Councillor Houston. Councillor Houston. Councillor McGill.
I'm here.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Tomash.
Yes, I'm here.
Nick Morris.
Present.
Colin O'Brien.
Present.
Mary Rennie.
Yes, I am
Lovely.
present.
Thank you. Gavin Black.
Yeah, I'm present.
And Anne Skillen.
Present.
And that's all the committee members present. Thanks, Chip.
Okay, and we've got Councillor Dodds substituting for Councillor Flanagan. Is there any other apologies or substitutions?
I would put an apology in for Councillor Houston as Vice President of COSLA. It's COSLA's annual conference, so he's probably tied up there.
Okay, thank you. Can I invite anyone if they've got any declarations of interest? No. Moving on to item number 3, urgent business. There isn't any urgent business brought today. So we move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. So we've got December 2nd, page 1, just check for accuracy. Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Do we agree that's an accurate record of the meeting?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. And the next minutes are January 25, which start on page 7. So that's page 7, page 8, page 9. Do we agree that's an accurate record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. So moving on then to item 5, which is the role and action log on page 11. So we've only got 3 items there, and they're all down as presented for removal. Could I ask if anybody has any questions about the role and action log? Colin.
Thanks, Chair. I wonder if I could have a copy emailed to me of the presentation that David sent out on the 4th of February. That's item 2, the explanation of preschool costs. I think it would probably go to elected members and maybe not to all members of the committee, but I would be interested to see that.
Okay, I'm sure we could organise that. Is that possible, David?
Yes, I'm happy to forward that on as long as Brownie's happy for me to share that externally. Yep.
Okay, we can organise that. Any other comments on the role and action log? No. Thank you. So moving on then to item 6, and we're delighted today to have a presentation promoting racial equality and anti-racism in education.
Good morning, it's Morgan Graham, Interim Service Manager for ASN and Wellbeing. The purpose of this paper is to inform the committee of the work that we have done to promote race equality and anti-racism in education as part of our wider work on equalities and children's rights. Of particular note is a summary of the work of the Central Scotland Regional Equality Council and the partnership work that we are undertaking with them. The Central Scotland Regional Equality Council are going to provide a presentation this morning on their work, and the committee is asked to note the progress of the current work we are undertaking, and we'd be happy to take any questions following the presentation. I'm going to pass over to colleagues from the Regional Equality Council who will provide their presentation. We have Kieran Gilmore, Equality Engagement Project Manager, and Eamon Haney, General Manager.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting us. Good morning, Chair and respected councillors. Morgan, do you want me to share from my end, or are you happy to share the presentation from your side?
If you're able to share it, that would be great. Thank you.
I can try that, yeah. I'm not sure if you can see my screen yet. Are you able to see it? Can someone let me know?
Yes, I can see it.
That's super. Thank you very much.
Up.
Super. Thank you. So my name is Eamon Haney, and I'm the General Manager for the Central Scotland Regional Equality Council, and I am joined today by my colleague Kieran Gilmore, who's our Equality and Engagement Manager. We are an equalities and human rights charity that was established 37 years ago, 1984, to primarily focus on issues that people from ethnic minority backgrounds face on their day-to-day life. We cover the Forth Valley area, the local authorities of Clackmannanshire, Falkirk and Stirling, and we have a long existing experience of working with victims of hate crime and discrimination in many of its forms. The work that we have been having meetings with the Stirling Council officials is basically to try and work on a strategic level to tackle issues with of integration, inclusion and hate crime. What we propose to do is to work directly with schools, that is staff and teachers, with the pupils and also with the parents directly. We have had meetings with councillors and council officers in November last year, and again took part in the safeguarding networks this year in January and in February for both secondary and primary schools respectively. And we have had some provisional agreements to date to start discussions with the McLaren High School and the Callender Primary School, looking at those sessions for the following school year. We are also registered level 1 asylum and protection advisors. So we've got plenty of experience dealing with those fine elements and fine issues with relating to discrimination and hate crime in the wider context. I would like to invite my colleague Kieran to speak a little bit more about our services and how can we make those to suit the Stirling Council's particular needs and pedagogic objectives.
Thank you, Iman, and Chair. I'm Kieran Gilmore, as said, the Equality and Engagement Manager with the Central Scotland Regional Equality Council. What we've envisioned for the work partnering with schools in the the Stirling area, is along a couple of strands. First of all, we would like to work with teachers to help to empower them to recognise and deal with racist incidents when they occur, or uses of racist language. And secondly, we would like to work with pupils themselves to help to celebrate diversity, promote anti-racism, and to try to stop some of the discrimination and hate crime issues that happen later down the line. As my colleague Aman mentioned, we have a great deal of experience helping the victims of discrimination and victims of hate crime. What we've been told by our service users, and when we've conducted surveys to see what kind of work would be most useful, is that more work, that people would like to see us work more upstream. So try to, as I say, try to stop some of these issues before they even happen in the first place. So we're aware that obviously that there's a history of anti-racist education in the Stirling area amongst schools. So we are not seeking to teach teachers how to do their job, or completely take over and disregard the work that's been done before. What we would like to do is to work in partnership to try and improve the anti-racist output from schools and for an education for teachers themselves, and build on the work that's already been done and lend our expertise over a great many years to improve that education as much as possible. So there's a few different things that we have discussed. Very most basic level things like presentations, the whole school assemblies. But what we really would like to do, what some of the safeguarding networks and our previous meetings have thrown up, is have real long-term partnerships that can involve working with teachers and creating, for example, e-learning packages, working with pupils on a more long-term basis, and really involving pupils in the design and delivery of these programs. So not talking down to pupils, but more helping to involve them in the process and having them lead the process. So we really feel that the most effective way to deliver these programs is if the pupils are fully invested in it and are in control, at least in some respects, of how it will go. And we feel that will be the most effective, rather than, as I say, talking down to them, actually having that peer support and almost like a peer delivery of the content. We're aware, of course, that a lot of the issues with what happens that goes on in schools comes from what happens in the home as well. And basically pupils are heavily influenced by what their parents think and the kind of language that is used in the home. It's not just what happens in the school. So in our longer term objectives, we would very much like to be involved with parents as well, and to try and do our bit as much as possible to change or to shift attitudes around these issues, and to help Stirling Council to meet these aims of anti-racism and reducing discrimination, reducing hate incidents. So we understand that teachers have a lot of education around these issues already. What's been thrown up in our work and some of the service users that we've dealt with when these issues come up is that there's sometimes issues around recognising what a racist incident might be, and it's often a kind of grey area that things fall into, and teachers sometimes feel not confident or well equipped to deal with it or to recognise it. So when we're working with staff, a big focus will be on recognising what racist incidents are, even including things around unconscious bias and these grey areas, and how to tackle them when they do occur. And we'd very much like to work towards a toolkit for that teachers can use for when these things come up. So I realise we're close to the end of our 10 minutes. So has anybody got any questions for us before we finish up?
Thank you. That was really interesting. I just wondered, how, you know, in recent years, social media for children has been, well, they use it all the time, and it's very influential in their lives. And how do you tackle that? Because that's not parents having an influence, it's not school having an influence, and we all know, I mean, I dare say everybody on the call today has had say a nasty email from somebody at some time or another. It's very easy when you're on the keyboard and in a room in your house, you're quite happy, you can say what you want, you're not looking at somebody's face. It's maybe more difficult to say nasty things to people's face. So how do you tackle that, the element from social media?
Well, I think something that's very, very important for that, first of all, is the peer-to-peer relationships. So a lot of what we really don't want to be is, as I said, just talking down to people. So they just attend a session one time, we talk at them, and then they go off and continue to do exactly what they were doing before. What's really important is what actually goes on between kids themselves. Obviously, what they see in social media as well, but a lot of that is from their own social networks and what is acceptable within their own social networks. So if we can really involve pupils in the process of designing and delivering these sessions and really have it so that it's a peer-to-peer discussion, not just us talking at them, we really hope that that will have that effect in the people's social networks, if you like, and that will have an impact on the social networking, as in what they see online. So we really feel that's a very, very important aspect, because we've got to get the kids themselves invested and bought into the process, and then that will have an impact on what will go on in their social networks. Obviously, we would, as part of what we're talking about, we would address what goes on social media as well. But I feel that the really key point about it is getting the buy-in from pupils.
Yeah, okay. I see Bryony's got her hand up. Do you want to come in on that one, Bryony?
Yeah, thank you. It's Bryony One, Interim Head of Education. I put my hand up before Kieran answered and really planned to give a very similar answer, but just I suppose to confirm that where we have the best success in schools and changing values around specific issues is when young people actually take the lead role in all of that, and they're very good at doing that as well. They're very often coming into these areas of work with very clear ideas about how things should be happening between themselves as pupils and within schools in terms of values. Obviously, that's not every young person, just as it wouldn't be every member of society either. So it's that leadership and the work on values within the schools and their communities which will most likely affect us. We also have work ongoing about e-safety awareness, and so there's a kind of interrelationship there between this work and that work from the point of view of social media change.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tolmash, you have your hand up. A question.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. That was great to see all the work's been done. I just wanted to say that, okay, children, and I have, okay, the grandchildren, and they have no prejudices, and what way can we, I think you probably slightly answered this question, but what way can we, okay, retain the natural thing for children to get on with people? Because it is a natural thing for kids to do that, and stop the influences, the outside, the influences to change that.
I think that's a really difficult question.
I think it's important to acknowledge that we can't always overprotect ourselves or our children. Influence is always going to be there. What we try and do is always have a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. So this is where we're trying to focus on education, identifying those values and encouraging pupils to be proud of those values and actually implement them into every single aspect of their day-to-day lives. And by trying to approach things from this positive angle, we believe and you start them from as young as possible. Obviously, your children and grandchildren are very lucky to have that, but not everybody have got that, unfortunately, which unfortunately is where all of those issues arise from. And so it's important that children like yours and your grandchildren set the example, and this is where we want them to take the lead. We want them to be very heavily involved in the planning process and the design process, in the delivery of this, because they learn. We know that from a very young age, children learn by copying. They all want to fit in. They all want to be the cool person in the school. They all want to be that person. So this is where we try always to take things or tackle things from a proactive approach and a positive approach, because that we believe that's how it would work better. It's almost impossible to stop the influence, but if we try and address that influence in a more positive way, more and more children will be doing that, and we hope that will be the trigger for a better effect that will last longer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beryl, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Gabina. Yeah, I know what excellent work the council do, and I've every admiration for that. I've been to events in the past which have been really excellent and thought-provoking. So it's efforts to stamp out bullying and racism are to be commended thoroughly. Just one question, though. Some aspects of this are potentially politically controversial. So could I just ask, I assume that both the council and the teachers you're interacting with are fully aware of potential dangers that teachers' own political views shouldn't creep into what's being taught, that everything's being taught in an even-handed way.
I'd say, thank you for the question. From our point of view, certainly, in our organisation, we're always very, very aware of potential political ramifications of what we do and what we say. As an organisation, we have representations for a number of different faiths, backgrounds, and racial identities, and we've always been very, very careful with our events to include people from all backgrounds. I mean, that's easy to say, but we quite often have people from backgrounds who wouldn't otherwise interact so much attend our events together, for example, and it's always in our minds whenever we put anything on social media, whenever we put anything out, whenever we put on an activity, even whenever we talk with each other, say in the office, to be careful about potential political or controversial issues. It's something that is always on our minds, certainly. So it's something that will never be forgotten whenever we put on a programme of education. It's something that we are always very, very aware of.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Farmer?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. And I think it's very useful to have an independent lens on the ongoing work that we're doing in terms of anti-bullying and anti-racism that you indicated in your presentation as work that's been long-standing in Stirling Council. I just wondered, in terms of how you feel the partnership work is going, and have you identified any particular gaps that you could highlight that's been addressed by the service in terms of good practice going forward? Thank you.
I would say we've been very happy so far with the progress of the programme. I think the officers and the councillors we spoke to in the first place were all very, very keen to get involved, which was fantastic. And we've spoken to, as Iman said, to the primary and secondary safeguarding networks, who again were very, very keen to engage. And I'm sure Bryony will expand on this a little bit, what schools have talked and are keen to get involved with us. Excuse me, what was the second part of your question? It was
in terms of during that partnership work, have you identified any gaps in terms of the work that has been undertaken that you've managed to influence in terms of improving our good practice?
Oh yeah, thank you. Something that has come up is the relative lack of hate crime report or hate incidents or prejudice-based bullying incidents in schools. We submitted a couple of freedom of information requests that suggested there have been, in the last 3 school years, there have been 3, 3 and 4 respectively prejudice-based bullying reports in the whole council area for race, religion, and the third thing, which I forget off the top of my head at the moment. And it doesn't really chime with the anecdotal experience of some of our service users and also some of the teachers. So we feel certainly that's one area that comes up as maybe where the policy doesn't quite match the practice. We're obviously aware of what the prejudice-based bullying policies are and that every incident ought to be reported through the proper channels, but we feel perhaps that isn't happening for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you.
Bryony, do you want to come in on this one?
Yes, that's the second time that I've put my hand up to say something, and then Kieran has said it before me. But that is exactly where we're aware there is a gap. It's similar in a way to incident reporting about other incidents that happen in schools. There's a bit of work to do in terms of building people's confidence that it's appropriate to report an incident, even when it's quite a low-level incident in their judgment. So, you know, and that awareness of the kind of grey area where something is absolutely a prejudice-based incident, but may not necessarily appear like that very obviously in the first instance. So that's the work I think we're keen to go forward with, to give people confidence there's not a negative consequence to raising awareness of those incidents, but instead a positive one that can help us do the work to make the change.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Errol.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation. I think towards the end of it, I caught an expression that there was a toolkit being developed for teachers. So my question is, I suppose I kind of assumed there was one. So my question is it felt that this is something that needs to be put in place, and teachers, has there been a gap in the support or information and knowledge base that they have on this that is now attempting or going to be addressed? Have they felt to be sort of properly supported in this and enabled in this in the past?
Ryan, do you want to come in here?
I suppose my best answer to that is to kind of maybe repeat to some extent what's been said. So there's policy and guidance in place, but we are aware at this moment in time it's not quite matching up with practice in this specific area, in the area of bullying, which could be seen to be prejudice-based as opposed to bullying in general terms. So we think there is further improvement that could happen. We have a baseline of information in place, but yes, we think there's more discussion and learning and co-production needed to get us into a better position.
Okay, can I just ask when the, thank you, can I just ask when the toolkit then is expected to be in place?
I would suggest at this point it's still in its quite early stages. It's something that we floated as an idea in some of our meetings, which there was some interest from the schools in. I wouldn't say that we are anywhere close to delivering it at the moment, and it's certainly going to form a key part of our discussions going forwards and what we develop with schools. So although it's something that, as I mentioned it in the presentation, in terms of our aims for the future to develop one, I wouldn't say that we are close to developing one at this particular moment.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. So we've been asked to note progress and impact of the current work being undertaken. So can we agree we've done that today?
Agreed.
So I'd like to thank Iman and Kieran for coming today and present. And we had spoke about perhaps doing a more detailed members briefing at some point. I have had a few dates sent to me, but I'm just wondering, because we've got local government elections in May, and we will have new, different, perhaps, councillors in post, it might be more effective to wait till after May and do a presentation then. So I just wondered what people thought of that. Do you think that's a more efficient use?
I think, Chair, that's a sensible approach. As we're coming up to local government elections, it will give, and it could be part of the ongoing early stage inductions for councillors, so that they're made aware of the good work that's going on in our schools, and obviously with the Central Scotland Regional Equality Council. So yeah, I would suggest after the local government elections would be most appropriate.
Yeah, okay. So we'll do that. So thank you very much for coming. A very interesting presentation, and we'll catch up. Well, the ones of us that are returning, we'll catch up in due course. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on the agenda, then we've got item number 7, which is the performance and strategic priorities update, and I think that might be you, Judy. Is that right?
Good morning. It's Carolyn McDade, Service Manager.
Morning.
Morning. Each quarter, Schools Learning and Education and Children and Families bring a performance and strategic priorities report to committee. This report provides an overview of the service's progress to date and is detailed in the appendices, and committee is asked to consider and comment on our progress. This report also provides an update on our performance in relation to a Care Inspector report for Arnhall Nursery, our achievement of Curriculum for Excellence levels, Learning for Sustainability, and Children and Families. Officers from across teams are present this morning to provide further information or take any questions.
Thank you, Caroline.
Sorry, Chair, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Before I open up to questions, I just wanted to ask, excuse me, I've had a few emails in particular about the early years, in particular in Killearn area. So I just wondered if Judy's on the call, if she could give some background to this, so that the concerns are with the partner providers. Have a number of them have sent in questions. I don't know if any other elected member has received an email from them.
Yes.
So that I think this is based on a parental survey, and I just wonder if you give us some background to the decision to do this. I know it's across the whole of the area. Other learning communities have had the same survey and the same sort of responses, I believe.
Good morning, everyone. It's Judy Edwards here, Service Manager for Early Years and Early Intervention. Councillor McGill, if I may, I'll just give a bit of background then, if that's okay. So, sorry, excuse me. In preparation for the planning of the expansion of early learning and childcare, we undertook a large-scale child sufficiency assessment in 2016 to inform our planning, because we were required to submit a plan for the expansion to government. That plan was then developed and published in 2018. The plan followed the requirements which were detailed in the Scottish Government publication, A Blueprint for 2020, the Expansion of Early Learning and Childcare in Scotland. The local authority model of provision changed to extended day and extended year in most places, as that was the most cost-efficient model. The market share between PVI, private and voluntary and independent sector, and local authority didn't change. And we only increased local authority provision by 57 places. What we also did at that time was we lifted what was called the cap on how many places parents could access in the PVI sector. So it was as many places as parents chose to use. We were held up nationally as an example of good practice for the implementation of the expansion, and we actually managed to deliver that a year ahead of the statutory duty despite COVID, because of the robust planning that had gone into place. So that was where we were, but that wasn't the end of the story for early learning and childcare, because we were required, in terms of the Children and Young People Scotland Act of 2014, to there's a duty placed on local authorities to consult with parents and carers on the delivery of funded ELC, and to have regard for the desirability of ensuring that ELC is made available in a way that is flexible and allows parents and carers an appropriate degree of choice when deciding how to access the service. So we had begun to make plans for how we would consult with families, parents and carers around ongoing provision of early learning and childcare. In 2019, though, our two partners in Killearn, who I believe have raised concerns with yourselves, asked that we survey parents again in the Balfron learning community in order that we could check again what the feeling was. And the key findings which were shared with the partners at the time were that there was a strong preference for extended day provision, i.e. 8 till 6, across all sectors and from the wider community. Excuse me, there was also a strong preference for extended year opening across all sectors and from the wider community. And there was a swing from the PVI sector to local authority sector in terms of future use. And what I mean by that was 94% of families who said they currently used PVI for extended year provision said that the future use was noted as being 48%. So it was quite a swing away from the PVI sector. The results of that survey supported the findings of the original childcare sufficiency assessment and clearly indicated that service users wanted local authority nurseries to open for more hours each day and for more weeks a year. Following that local authority survey in Balfron, we actually then carried out the same survey across all learning communities, because we were duty bound to consult, as I said earlier. The Children and Young People Act requires us to actually consult every 2 years, and we then consulted with families again at the end of last year. And that it's those results that are summarised in the performance paper today. The results were consistent with both previous surveys in that parents wanted longer days and more weeks of the year provision. So going back to 2019, at that point, the Balfron learning community wasn't offering 1,140 hours of ELC, because they were actually the last phase, which was 2020. But at that time, we were recruiting staff for phase 3, and we knew at some point, given the 2019 survey in Balfron, that at some point we were going to have to open up for more weeks in the local authority setting in Killearn. So we recruited staff for Killearn to be extended year at the same time as the rest of the recruitment. Staff in Killearn were keen to do that, and the plan at that time was always that we would use the staff in other ways until such times as they were needed. Now, when we were implementing the expansion of ELC, we could ask staff to change their working hours, their shifts, but we couldn't force staff to go from term time to extended year, which was absolutely fine. But that meant that we had some settings who didn't have enough extended year staff. So the plan was, if we recruited the extended year staff in Killearn who were keen to do that, we could use them elsewhere over the summer holiday period. And that would mean that it was actually a really a cost efficient model, because we weren't using supply staff. If when Killearn is open for extended year and parents for some reason don't choose to use it, we've still got that option available to us, which will be very helpful and cost efficient to the service. As I've said earlier, as I've already said, sorry, we have a duty to provide choice for parents. And in Killearn, we now have, going forward, quite a choice, because we have Mulberry Bush, which is a private partner, which is the Montessori approach. We have Heron House, which their USP is it's a home-based environment. It's actually a converted house within a housing estate. There's a further nursery has opened in Killearn called Our Little Outdoor Classroom, which at the moment isn't in partnership with us. They will be entitled to apply to come into partnership once they have a care inspection and they achieve the grades of good, but so far they're not. And then we'll have the local authority nursery, which will be open for more weeks than it is currently. And when I talk about the weeks open, the local authority nursery will be open for 45.6 weeks, whereas some of the partners actually are open for up to 51. So parents have a range of choices there as to what they want, where they want to place their child. Thinking back to the blueprint for the expansion of early learning and childcare, there are 4 principles, and we have to make sure that we can fulfil those. And they are that our service provides accessibility, quality, flexibility and affordability. And in order to do that, we believe there has to be sufficient choice. If I may, I'd like to just look forward now and tell members and the group some of what's planned for the future. So, in the programme for government, it has been stated that the expansion of the early years will expand further. And in this programme, in this government term, the expansion of ELC will now expand to universal provision for 1- and 2-year-olds. We don't have a detailed plan for that from government yet, but we are beginning to future-proof what that might look like. So that's coming. Also, we have no plans at this time to have any under 3 provision in the nursery class, which means that the private sector have that complete market share of that sector. Something else that we're doing currently and will support us in the future is we are working, we offered all private partners the option to become part of a working group to look at how we would commission places for eligible 2-year-olds with our private partners, which we don't currently do. So we don't have any of our partners from Killearn who've chosen to be part of that working group, but we have said that once that piece of work is finished, then it'll be an amendment to contracts if partners so choose to come in to offer that. We are also part of the government deferred entry pilot. So we now have, for example, in Mulberry Bush, 5 children who've chosen to defer and stay in Mulberry Bush. There aren't any that I'm aware of in Heron House as yet. There are also 114 new houses to be built in Killearn, so hopefully that's going to mean that there'll be more children looking for more nursery provision. And the final thing for the future is we have just this week intimated to our partners that we're going to increase the hourly rate. I hope I have provided an overview of what's happening, what has been happening and what is happening, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Judy. That's very comprehensive. One of the comments that in the email that I've received is, could you not open? So can I just clarify what the opening is? The nursery at the minute, the extended provision, what you're suggesting is, basically it's an operational matter really, but it's the only change is it's now going to be open during the summer holidays. Well, not just the summer holidays, but holidays. So first of all, that's that. So the suggestion in the email is you open other establishments in the Balfour Lennon community rather than in Killearn, but the other local authority nurseries in the Balfour Lennon community are already providing what we're going to be doing in Killearn. So what we're doing is making Killearn the same as every other local authority nursery.
Yes.
Right.
So in every learning community, a apart from one which doesn't have any partners. So there are 7
Yes.
learning communities, and in every learning community, apart from one that doesn't have any partners, we have managed to achieve our aspiration and the government aspiration of choice. So Killearn will be open, as I've said, 45.6 weeks, whereas currently it's only open term time. The opening hours don't change. It's still 8 till 6. And as I've said earlier, because we have the luxury of being able to redeploy staff around to fill where there are gaps, if parents don't choose to use it, then that's fine. But that's not the intelligence we're getting.
Okay, thank you. Right, I see a few hands up, so we'll go to Councillor Earl. Thanks for waiting through all that, Councillor Earl.
Thanks, Convener. No, that was really helpful. Thanks, Judy, because you'll probably there's a few queries and questions about it, and that's actually taken us right through, which is really helpful. I suppose just to follow up on one query from it, that another point that is articulated quite often in the correspondence we get refers to the Scottish Government guidance that you referred to from a point of view of requirement to provide choice. And then another part of the guidance is the use what you have, use what you purchase guidance as well. So I suppose what would be useful for us to understand is how the requirement to provide choice and the guidance to do this is balanced together. That would be helpful.
So in terms of use what you have, the term that was used was sweat your assets. So we had to balance that with the funding that we received for the expansion, which wasn't as much as we'd hoped for. And in terms of sweating our assets, what we did then was, previous to 1140, most nurseries were open 9 till 3. So therefore we had that hour in the morning and a few hours at the end of the day when they weren't open. So we didn't have money to build new nurseries or to commission lots of places with other providers. The sensible thing to do seemed to be to open up our own nurseries from 8 until 6, allowing us to have 2 lots of children in over the day, which, depending whether they were term time or extended year, allowed us to fulfil our requirement to deliver 1140 hours. And we only increased local authority places by 57, as I said to you, as a result of doing that. The other thing that we did in terms of sweating our assets was, previous to 1140, there was a cap on the number of places which the council was allowing parents to use in terms of private providers. And that cap was lifted. So a member of my team, who was in my team previously, visited all private providers at that time to see how many places do you have. We got a sense of that, and we said we will allow parents to use as many of these as they want. It's completely open to choice, and that is how we balanced sweating assets with giving families choice.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And just I've got a second question, Convener, just on a wider point, if that's okay. Just from a point of view of the survey that's detailed from 2.2 onwards on page 21, 289 people participated in the survey. Can you give some idea of was the service pleased with that level of response? What sort of percentage is that of parents that could have and carers that could have responded? It's just to get an idea of the overall picture for the survey cohort.
So we asked the same question of the team who managed the Engage platform, because we don't have a sense of how well are these things responded to, and we were advised that was actually a good response. So we would have currently around 1,400 children using our services. So in terms of that, it's not a terribly high percentage, but what I would say is that's not the only way that we gather intelligence, and it's not the only way we should gather intelligence. So parents within the nursery, particularly, we haven't had any feedback from our PVI partners around what their parents are telling us, in particular from their own nursery consultation. They haven't offered that, but what we have had from the local authority nursery is parents asking, could the nursery be open extended year? So we take a range of information to make decisions.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tolamash.
Okay. Thank you, Judy, for that. Okay, presentation. The question that I have is that you talk about future developments in Killern. Okay, the houses being built and a popular, potentially a demand. Private sector in Killern say in correspondence that the hourly rate that they get from Stirling Council is not financially sustainable, and they question if they would be there in order to meet that demand. So that's my question about the financial sustainability based, excuse me, on the hourly rate.
Thank you. So we intimated to our partners this week that we would be there would be an uplift in the hourly rate, and we've had one concern raised with us from a partner in Killern about that rate. Now, across the country, there are some partners who do have concerns about their sustainability, and as a result of that, the government are currently undertaking a partner cost collection exercise. And we have been asked to encourage our partners, which we've done, to participate in that. And the reason why it's really important that all of the partners in Stirling share their costs is that will then give us a robust analysis of their position, their situation. So that's happening, which is really helpful, and that will help to hopefully inform future rates. But the other thing, in terms of the Stirling Council rate, you'll know there are 32 local authorities in Scotland. Only 3 pay more than Stirling, 2 pay the same as us, and 26 actually pay less than us. So based on the funding that we have for the expansion of early learning and childcare, I think we're in a fairly strong position, and we always have been. We've been sitting in the top 3 or 4 authorities for payment since the outset of the expansion, and that is the position for 2021-22. 3 pay more than us, 2 pay the same, and 26 authorities pay less. During COVID, we actually continued to pay partners even when they were closed. We took that decision. Obviously spoke to Bryony and Kevin before that as part of that, but we did pay partners throughout the closure. We pay in advance. We make sure that partners receive money in advance. And we have also administered the government funding, the government COVID support that's been in place for partners. So the first one was called the Temporary Restrictions Fund. Then there was a Transitional Support Fund, which, as I say, my team administered, and for Stirling Council, and it's been made known to us now that there's going to be a further fund available for partners. It's called the Omricon Fund, but we don't have details of that yet.
Okay, so would you say, Judy, that you would be prepared? You have been prepared to meet these partners and
absolutely,
and to discuss their concerns.
Absolutely, we've given dates. We've given dates to one partner who asked that, but we haven't had a response yet. So absolutely happy to meet. We have done before, and we'll do it again.
Okay, thank you very much, Judy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beryl.
Yeah, thanks, Gabina. Thanks to Judy for that very comprehensive background briefing on what's happening in Killern. And I know it's a very complicated situation, and I guess Killern's quite unusual in having such a broad range of different provision. You made reference to the fact that in 2019 various concerns were raised, and I know that at that time things were rather fraught, and relations between the department and the partner nurseries were not good at the time. There was a breakdown in trust there. And if I remember correctly, there were 2 broad concerns, which were from the partner nurseries, and their concerns were that the council were not adequately using the existing capacity that they were providing, that they were over expanding their own offering, which was in effect unnecessary competition for the private nurseries, and they were also concerned about being offered an unfairly low hourly rate. And it was an extremely complicated situation to get to the bottom of all that, and I don't know that I ever did. So could I urge you to continue to work as hard as you can to continue and to foster good working relationships and to be sensitive to the needs of the private nurseries? Just one question then. You said that the hourly rate is going up. Could I ask you what it's going up from and what it's going up to?
Yes. So currently we pay our private partners £5.55 per hour and 35 pence if they provide lunch. It's going up to £5.70 and 35 pence if we provide lunch. An additional 35 pence if we provide lunch.
So doing it quickly in my head, is that about 3%? I
think it's a bit more than that, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. So that's all about Killarn and the early years. Is there any questions on the rest of this paper? Councillor Beryl, you still have your hand up. Do you have a question for anything, any other item in the paper? No. Councillor Errol.
Thanks, convener. It was page 61, section 21/22 DPCF 08, improving outcomes for children in need of care. I was just taken by the first section in the narrative, limited uptake for online tutoring, and then discussion that a lack of relationship with the tutor and the offer of one-to-one tutoring remains available through tutoring services. Can I just establish clarity that the offer of one-to-one tutoring that's available, is that in-person tutoring or online? Have we got back to in-person tutoring?
Marvin, you have your hand up.
Yes, that would, I think, have been initially virtual, and I would need to double check that, but it's certainly when we had that, it was last year that we had started that, so I would have thought in between lockdowns, etc., it was more likely to be virtual at that stage.
Right, but would the expectation be that it would be in person now?
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay. So would that offer be reiterated back to all the pupils concerned on the basis that now it's in person?
Yes, absolutely. And the virtual head team are working really closely just now to ensure that the service continues to be offered to those young people.
Thank you.
Any other points? No. So we've been asked to consider and comment on the performance reports indicated and note and comment on the wider updates provided. So can we agree with we've done that?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you. So moving on, we've got improving children's and young people's mental health and emotional well-being. And is that you, Morvan?
It is, yes. Thank you, Councillor McGill. Morvan Graham, Interim Service Manager, ASN and Wellbeing. The purpose of this paper is to inform committee of the work currently being undertaken to improve children and young people's mental health and emotional well-being. Of particular note for committee members is the implementation of our school counselling service and of the impact that has had over the short period of time it's been in place, and also the work that we are doing to develop community mental health well-being supports and services. Committee is asked to note progress and impact of the current work being undertaken, and we'd be happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, Councillor Tallnash, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thanks, convener. On page 12519, 1.91, that's a very good, the aspiration that every person will have access to local community wellbeing services. Where are we on that? Obviously, a journey to get there. So where are we? What percentage of pupils at the moment would have access to that? Children, and when would we expect to get close to that?
I think I can just come in there. That obviously is an aspirational target that's within the national framework that was published last year. But we do have our lead officer, Joanna Bassett, for mental health. She's here today and she might be able to give you just a bit more information. We've just completed a report for the Scottish Government, a 6-monthly report, and Joanna might be able to just give you a bit more information about the work that we have been taking forward and the number of young people that have been part of that so far.
Thank you.
Hello, so my name's Joanna Bassett. I'm the lead officer for community mental health supports and services. That's a really good question, Councillor Tolmarsh, because that's such a broad thing, isn't it, that we're trying to achieve. And one of the key things we've been doing over the last 18 months probably is talking to our children and young people. We've talked to over 2,000 actually of them, and also to parents and carers and a wide range of professionals as well around what services and supports currently are available, and to try and work out where the gaps are. And from that to then try and work out what the gaps is that we need to fill, because obviously what one young person might need to support will be completely different to what another child would be able to support. So that makes that quite hard to say, oh yes, so many percentage have got that support, because actually what everybody needs is a little bit different. So what we've managed to do, which we're really happy with, is we've managed to talk to so many people and have really got some clear, consistent themes around what is working well and needs to be extended, and what is not working so well and where the gaps are. And it was fairly consistent, actually, whether you spoke to a young person or whether you spoke to a professional, whether you spoke to a parent carer, it was very similar themes that were coming out. And it's from that that we've developed a plan. And this paper explains some of those things that we're putting in place in order to try and fill those gaps. And what we did at the very beginning of this process was we worked with our young people to develop a set of statements about how, if everybody was able to access the support they needed when they needed it, what would that look like? What would you experience that as? So that ranged from things like, I'm able to ask for support when I want it, to things like I'm supported by a consistent person who I trust, to things like I'm able to help set my goals, so I'm able to help design what happens to me and what my path through that is. And through this consultation and engagement, we've actually benchmarked that, so we know where we're at for different age ranges of children and young people across Stirling, and we're currently just going out to benchmark that for our 18 to 24-year-olds as well. And that gives us a really good starting point for us then to measure how we're doing going forwards. And of course, as you'd expect, different age groups have different issues. So our older young people are not quite so aware, maybe all feeling confident about asking for help when they want it to, whereas our younger ones feel that they're much more comfortable about doing that. And certainly we're definitely using that data to take forward.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne, for that. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. So that, you know, through the paper, you're explaining all the different ways that the support's going in, and I like this together all. Seems to be very popular with young people. But on page 126 at 2.8, you're talking about males not, the uptake's not as great for the therapeutic counselling as females. So what efforts are you trying, are you having to target the male population in particular, because we know that male suicides are higher, and they have been for decades. So, you know, that figure kind of jumped out at me when I read the paper, and it's quite concerning. It's quite a difference in the number of girls as opposed to boys there. So just wondered what you were going to do to address that. Morgan.
Yeah, just that's a really good question, and I think possibly when we've had a similar discussion at committee maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we also touched on that aspect in terms of our young males. I think for us, this is where we really want to focus on what we call a whole systems approach. So we have a number of different supports and services, but it's making sure that, you know, what we have will meet the needs of a wide range of young people. We know that the talking type therapy, the counselling, etc., is often more readily accessed by females. We know that's not necessarily always what young males would choose. However, we are also looking at work that's just raising awareness within our school environments, for example, that would allow you know, all of our young people to be able to understand that it's okay to not feel okay, and to be able to seek support when they need to. That's why we have looked at other resources such as Together All, which is an online mental health service that might, you know, males may respond better in a sense to accessing online support. So there's just a range of things that we are looking to explore. We've also got a mentoring service. We're funding part of a mentoring service, albeit that's initially for our care experienced young people. But we are also about to bring in some community wellbeing workers who are going to be working with more of our young people who are in vulnerable situations, and that may include some of our young males. I don't know if we've got Amy Gracie, who's our coordinator for school counselling. I don't know whether, Amy, you want to come in with anything there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said as well. It's worth perhaps noting, though, that since that statistic applied, we do have more males accessing the service at the moment. So we've gone from about 27% up to 33% at the moment. So there is obviously still that difference, and certainly that is the case sort of nationally, but we are looking at kind of, you know, we know that counselling is a fantastic support for so many young people, but it's not necessarily the right support for all young people. And we are keen to kind of broaden that out and consider other options as well, as Morgan was saying.
Okay, thanks. That's really, really reassuring to hear. As the mother of females who do nothing but talk and a son who never talks, it really is quite worrying because I've no idea really how he's feeling. It's really difficult to engage sometimes with them. So that's really good to know. So, Councillor Errol.
Thank you, convener. It was just to ask the role of the counsellors within the school. What are their referral pathways if they are concerned, if they have worries about the way a pupil is presenting to them, what they're raising, and they want to refer and they want to raise directly? What do they do themselves? Where's the pathway that they take?
I'm happy to answer that, Morgan, or is that okay? Yeah, it's certainly something that that we're aware of, and it's something that we do gather that information in terms of reporting to Scottish Government as well, that kind of onward referral pathway. So we are aware that there are some young people that are referred into counselling, and perhaps it's a different support that would be more beneficial. So we have a number of young people who are counsellors, would work with schools to refer on to CAMS or onto the school child protection coordinator or onto other services such as Women's Aid or young carers or something like that. So we're aware that that is happening. We're obviously still quite a new service, and we're building up that partnership working at the moment as well, making sure that our counsellors are aware of other supports and services in the local context and how they access that. Morgan, do you have anything to add on to that as well?
No, I think you've covered that, Councillor Errol. Is there anything? Does that answer your question, or is there anything more specific that you're looking for that?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. But so what I'm trying to get clarity on here is, there you are, you're a counsellor in a school. Pupil comes to you. what they talk about, how they talk about it, what leads you to concern. Now, that rather than you signposting, that counsellor signposting the person for their referrals, what can the counsellor do themselves if they feel that they should refer something directly themselves?
That's a good question. So just to put this in context, we have our school counsellors who receive clinical supervision. That is has to be in place to allow them to fulfil their professional registration. So through clinical supervision and also through the support from Amy as the coordinator, they are made aware of other supports and services that they can refer on to if they have any concerns about a young person that they are currently working with. There's also quite significant discussion prior to referral onto the school counsellor. As Amy said, school counselling is not always appropriate for everyone. We have had to work quite hard with schools around that to let them know that, you know, whenever a young person, for example, with presenting with emotional distress, the initial response has often been, we have school counsellors in place, therefore, you know, the automatic response would be we refer on, and we are trying to work with them to say that school counselling is not always the most appropriate referral for a young person, and that's why we're looking at that wider system and the range of supports that we've got available. One of the pieces of work that we are just starting to do is looking at clearer pathways, and that's to make it very clear when we would be referring on to a particular service or support, so that our schools, our parent carers, our partners, etc., are very aware of when it would be appropriate to request a particular support and service, so that it's a lot clearer for everyone involved. I don't know if that answers your question a wee bit more, Councillor.
I see Marie has her hand up. Is there anything you want to add to that, Marie?
Yes, thank you, Marie Valenti, Senior Manager for Children and Families and Justice Social Work. It is very much along the point about young males and their difficulty in expressing their feelings, and how we can make that easier for them, and how we can address this whole issue about young male suicide. And I think absolutely right, not every young male that I know would want to go and see a counsellor. So it's just to reassure elected members that we do have other services in place for young men. So in particular, the investment in Includim. Those people are very skilled at working with these young men and know how to address their issues. And we are looking at expanding our youth justice team. And the focus of that work will be on group work. So some of you who are as old as me will remember the old days of intermediate treatment, when you used to have young males. It was very much activity based, sometimes outdoor based, and very much about peer challenge and peer support for those young men. So also we have a service manager post, which you gave me money for from COVID for 2 years, and we will be employing that person to focus in on our youth justice team and really hone in that service. So by way of reassurance, there are other methods that we use in order to try and engage with these young men who I agree very much need our help. Hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Do you have another question, Councillor Errol?
No, thank you, Kabina. I think Morven and Amy have covered the point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. My question is also about CAMS, which is a Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. I know in the past that there have been problems with CAMS in terms of long waiting lists and quite a long period of time between a child or young person being referred and actually being seen. My question is, are the wider support services that you've been telling us about impacting on the number of referrals to CAMS, and are the young people who are referred seen quickly, because it's important that these young people will be will have the sorts of problems that have not been able to be dealt with in the other services that you're talking about. So basically it's just a situation with waiting lists and referral times for CAMS.
Yeah, Morven.
Yeah, just to come in on that, Councillor Simpson, with regards to CAMS, obviously just now we are still aware that they have quite a significant waiting list. I think that's been impacted over the past couple of years with the pandemic. In terms of the first part that you asked around, does the work, or is the work that we are currently doing impacting on the number of referrals, for example, going to CAMS? I think at this stage it's too early for us to be able to say whether we're having an impact. We've really just been looking at supports over the past year. It's a national question. It's a question we ask nationally in forums as well. And it is something that we're looking at in terms of a robust evaluation of the supports that each local area across Scotland that are the supports and services that you're putting into place, and how we evaluate that. And that will be one of the questions as we go forward, is does this impact on the referrals going to CAMS, and will it reduce the referrals going to CAMS? I think the important part for us is less about whether there's a reduction in referrals to CAMS, because we won't necessarily know that that means that the services that we're putting into place has an impact. I think the question would be, are the referrals going to CAMS more appropriate referrals for a specialist service like CAMS, where we are talking about significant mental health needs and the specialist services that CAMS can offer. So, as I say, very early stages, but it is certainly something that we're considering both locally and nationally as we progress.
Can I also ask, is there a problem of recruitment of workers to the child and adolescent mental health services at the moment? Is this a national problem, if there is one?
There's certainly been a national focus, I have to say, on CAMS. There has been a service specification published between a year and 2 years ago, and that is to try and get some level of consistency across CAMS services, because they do operate in some areas quite differently, for example, in comparison to Forth Valley. I suppose I can't really speak for CAMS, but my understanding is that there have been some staffing capacity issues within CAMS, and I think they're working very hard to try and resolve that. And I believe as part of the National Service Specification, funding is being allocated to CAMS as part of the wider mental health work to ensure that they can target where they have the most significant need. And of course, some of that will be around the staffing resource for CAMS.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just on that, as you say, it's I suppose the community supports that this paper and all the supports round about that. There might not be a reduction in the number of referrals to CAMS, but more appropriate referrals to CAMS. But the same might be the same number, but that's a good thing, because it means then that these people who have got significant issues are getting support in the right, they're getting sent to the right place, where maybe they're not now because the system hasn't been working so terribly well. So that might well be a positive thing, despite the fact there's not a reduction in the numbers, if it's an appropriate referral. Colin O'Brien, you've got a question?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, this is a very good report and great to see what we're doing in this area. I wondered if I might have some more information about one of the actions, looking at page 128, and it would be 216.4. Talking about exploring other opportunities here. We live in a very fortunate area where our communities are actually very rich in sporting and voluntary activities and all kinds of organisations. And I wonder, looking at this recommendation, or this action here, clearly we must have some programme to be involved in all of these groups. And I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about that, because clearly they can have a great role in supporting young people who need to work with others and get involved in things and be just part of our communities.
Joanna, do you want to come in on that one?
Yes, I can, certainly. Yes, you're right. There are a lot of organisations doing some extremely good work around this area, and also who may have some really good innovative ideas around what we should be doing. So in January we launched a community fund for our third sector colleagues to request funds of up to £2,000 to provide activities around the 5 ways to wellbeing for children and young people, and also for family work, to try and build in some more of this informal support. The applications for that have just closed, and excitingly we've received 32 applications from organisations who are wishing to do this type of work. And we're in the process at the moment. We have a small multi-agency panel, and we're ploughing through those applications, and we're meeting in a week and a half's time to actually determine which of those organisations can be doing that, and hopefully providing some really exciting opportunities in the kind of April to June period.
Thanks very much for that, because I think it's very important that we have a role as a council, but also it's the communities, in a sense, that these young people belong to, and that's where they must find their futures and where they must develop with their partners and their friends and their families. So I'm very pleased to hear that we're doing something. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No more questions. So we've been asked to note the progress and impact of the current work. I can agree we've done that. Thank you. So moving on to item number 9, and this is the review of the provision of the education provision at Buchanan Primary School. Is this yourself, Caroline?
It is, thank you. Good morning again. Caroline McDade, Service Manager. In June 2021, committee agreed to a formal consultation to consider the permanent closure of Buchanan Primary School. The service subsequently undertook this consultation following statutory processes. This paper presents the report on the consultation, detailing activities and responses received. The report concludes by recommending that education provision at Buchanan Primary School be discontinued with effect from 24th June 2022 or as soon as possible thereafter, and committee is asked to approve the school's permanent closure. Officers, including Kay Robertson and Sally Kennedy, who undertook the consultation, are present to provide any answers to questions, as is Patrick Robertson, the head teacher at Adjournment Primary School.
Thank you, Caroline. Does anybody have any questions? No. Oh, Councillor Tollemache.
It was just an observation and a question. If this decision is made today, what way will the council recognise all of the pupils and the teachers who've been at the school for all the years? I don't know actually the age of the school, but it would be if the decision is made, it would be good to do some form of the way of the council to recognise that. Thank you.
Caroline?
Yep, thank you for that comment. Just to add in there, in a previous situation, which was Trossachs Primary School, what happened was we linked with former pupils, parent staff, local community, and we did a small celebration event and put a plaque on the school. So I'm not saying what we would do, but we would link with all the stakeholders and decide on something appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Beryl?
Yeah, thanks, Kabir. It was just a comment, if I may, not a question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks to the officers for having carried out this consultation, and just to say that as a local member, if there had been parental concerns raised, then it's likely I would have been opposing this all along, but there have been no parental concerns. They've all voted with their feet. There seems to be absolutely no issue whatsoever, and the parents are very happy with the provision at Drummond. So I've no objection whatsoever to the permanent closure of the school.
Okay, thank you. There's no more further hands up, so we've been asked to note the contents of the published consultation report and on the proposal to close the school permanently and approve the permanent closure of Buchanan Primary School from 24th of June 2022 or as soon as possible thereafter. So are we in agreement with the recommendations? Yes, thank you. So moving on, we have the Care Inspectorate report, item number 10. I'm not sure.
Good morning. It's Carolyn Love here, Team Leader for Early Years. This report provides information with regard to an inspection carried out by the Care Inspectorate of Rathlock Nursery in August 2021. Rathlock Nursery is situated within the Rathlock Community Campus and is one of our largest early years provisions. It currently provides early learning and childcare for 151 children between the ages of birth to 5 years old. 19 of these current children are care experienced and 68 children attending are currently on staged intervention. This term, the nursery provided places for 23 eligible 2-year-olds. Rathlock Nursery have 36 members of staff, including support staff, and work in partnership with 11 different services, including social work, speech and language, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, the additional support needs team, educational psychology, dietitians, health visitors, the family support team, and Home Start to provide support to children and families in the local community. The nursery continues to have strong links with feeder schools with an increased focus on enhanced transition to support children moving on from early learning and childcare into school. The Care Inspectorate grades nurseries on a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being unsatisfactory and 6 being excellent. Rathlock Nursery was awarded a grade of good for the quality of leadership and management, and were awarded grades of adequate for the areas of care and support and for staffing. The fourth area which can be inspected is environment wasn't inspected at the time. I'm joined today by Leanne Finch, who came into post as Head of Establishment just prior to the inspection, and together we're happy to answer any questions there may be. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm aware that the leadership has been a bit disjointed because there's a new person in post now. So, and I noticed there was a few recommendations here. So I just wondered if you could just talk how the implementation of these recommendations are going and how that's being measured, I suppose.
Yeah, so support has been given to Leanne, who's new to post, from Kate O'Neill, who's our Quality Improvement Officer for the early years, and a robust action plan has been put in place. I'll pass over to Leanne, who can talk to you about that in more detail, but I would like to say that during the inspection, the Care Inspectorate did comment that they have complete confidence in Leanne as a leader with her vision and her passion for early years, and so do we as an early years team. Leanne, can I pass on to you?
Good morning, I'm Leanne Finch, Head of Rathlock Nursery. As Carolyn's mentioned, we are being supported by the early years team and also HR through consultation processes and taking that advice to continue on our improvement journey. Over the last 6 months, there has been considerable staffing changes, not only within the senior leadership team, but also across ECEs and support staff. There was operational decisions made in terms of following the Care Inspectorate inspection of staff movement within playrooms that I suppose looked at individual supports in terms of training and where staff were best placed within playrooms. So those changes took place, and moving on from that, it's led to staff movement between establishments or staff choosing for additional posts, which I suppose has led us to recruit for 7 additional ECE posts. All that given, I think it's the importance for us in looking at what training and support is offered from senior management team down to support staff. So within that, we've looked at the range of training and the skills and the leadership base that all staff members can bring to post, where they're best placed in terms of the age ranges that they're working with children, and through that implementing individual targeted support plans for some staff, as well as termly support meetings universally for the full staff team. In addition to that, we're looking at how we are implementing a daily coaching and mentoring role, so to ensure that we've got responsive practice and that we're not being reactive to any improvements that are required. So we do have a wide range of children's support needs, and I think it's about recognising where staff are on their improvement journey, and as a senior management team, us facilitating that support at an early level and being in response to what children's support needs are at that current time. From that, we've also, in consultation with the early years team, we've created an inclusion role, which then provides a senior member of staff who is non-racial committed to really have that targeted focus on implementing and embedding children's personal plans. With such a high number of children on stage intervention, it's not only about the embedding of the plans, it's about taking in, it's provided deeper relationships with multi-agency professionals, engaging in much more longer discussions, and then that coaching support provided directly to staff working face-to-face with children on a daily basis. So that's been an invaluable role in terms of having that commitment to only that and the responsiveness that that gives to children's individual support needs.
That's good. You've got a lot of work going on there, so that's really good, and accepting that support makes such a difference. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Leanne. That's addressed one of my questions. I was going to ask, what's the transformational change? And you've done that, so thank you. My other questions, two questions, are a bit wider on it. First of all, the recommendation 1 that has been provided under quality of staffing, that is a pretty wide-ranging and all-encompassing fundamental recommendation when you look at it, what it's saying needs to be done. And I understand there's been conversations about we've been informed that the disruption of the leadership there and the staffing and everything, but that must have surely given rise to concern when you get a recommendation like that. And my second question on the second area that was assessed, quality of care and support, which was also assessed as adequate, was the service and the nursery surprised that, given that was an adequate rating, that the Care Inspectorate didn't have any recommendations at all under that, which I find a bit odd, to be honest with you?
I think in relation to that, there was some evidence of what the strengths were. So that adequate rating of recognising that there is improvement required, but there was strengths there that were present. And I think it's about that's where our inclusion role is really fulfilling. I think that direct recommendation, because it puts that consistency of approach in that fulfilment to ensuring that there is that consistency, and it's about sustaining the improvement as we progress.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit more about the wider context around that. Obviously, the inspection took place last August and we were still in the middle of the global pandemic. Judy's spoken earlier about the early years expansion, which obviously brought a number of newly qualified educators into the workforce. And with Ratlock being such a large nursery, during this period of time, due to COVID, we've had quite a bit of supply cover in as well. So some of the staff observed on the day were supply cover as well, which is where some of the references have been made.
Right, thank you. And Caroline, just were you surprised that from the Care Inspectorate issue a grading of adequate, and from your perspective and the nursery's perspective, I just find it that they do that, but they haven't found it necessary to place or any recommendations out there under that grading. And you think, well, if you don't need to put any recommendations out there, why did you have to grade it as adequate?
Yeah, we did have dialogue with the Care Inspectorate following the gradings, and they maintained the grades they have. But as Leanne has said, there were enough strengths identified that no recommendations were required in this case. Nationally, at the moment, there seems to be a raising of the bar with Care Inspectorate, and there seems to be a lowering of grades across, and that has been fed back through the ADIS group nationally back to the Care Inspectorate.
Okay, no, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks for that. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Judy, I saw your hand pop up there. Is there something you want to add?
It's exactly what Caroline went on to say.
I thought
that
that
we have absolutely raised this with the Care Inspectorate about the lack of consistency. So thank you.
Yeah, it is quite subjective at the end of the day, isn't it? So anyway, no more questions. So the recommendations are to consider the outcomes of the inspection and make comment on the key findings. I agree we've done that. So moving on to, where are we now? I've got my bits of paper here. Item number 11, which is reserved places. Is this Aileen? If you're speaking, Aileen, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Sorry, sorry. Aileen Moore, Team Leader, Resource and Business Team. This report identifies the number of reserved places we deem necessary to ensure that there is sufficient provision for children at their catchment school, and in particular, those who join during the academic year. The number of spaces have been determined using historical data on late enrolments and information on planned house build within the catchment. Isabel Smith, Forward Planning Officer, is also here with me today to answer any questions that committee may have on this paper.
Okay, I just have one on page 269 at 3.1, equalities impact. It says will have a minor positive impact. I just wondered what that was.
Isabel, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that one. Councillor McGill, we just thought that it was a positive impact, just in the sense that it would make sure that all pupils could go to their catchment schools, so there wouldn't be any pupils that could be impacted negatively by having to go to the next nearest school, which is what we have to do should any pupil move into catchment during the school year if we don't reserve those spaces. And it was just particularly thinking, for instance, about travelling communities, as we know that they can be the type of people sometimes who do move into the catchment area, and so the small positive impact was just to note that they wouldn't have any negative impact from not being able to join their nearest catchment school if they wanted to enrol there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beryl, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Kavita. It wasn't my original question, but could I just first of all pick up on the point that was just made about this being only positive? I don't agree with that. I can understand why this is done. I have no issue with it being done. I have no issue with the specifics and the number of places being reserved. But of course, there is always a potential negative impact on parents who perhaps make a placing request and that placing request can't be granted because of these reserved places for understandable reasons. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say that this is only positive. Obviously, it's about balancing everybody's needs, and some people may lose out so that others can gain from it. So that's just a point I'd like to make. My only other point was, again, as I said, I have no issues with the paper. It's a point of order. Can I just check? We're being asked to note this. I had a sort of idea that in the past this was an item that the committee had to approve. My recollection may be at fault there, but could I just check that it is appropriate that we note it rather than approve it?
Yes, we just got advice from our legal team this year, looking back at it, that actually the decision about this has already been delegated to the Chief Education Officer from the first time that we just created the reserved spaces policy. So every year in the past we have brought it to the committee for approval, as you rightly say, Councillor Beryl, but we've just been given the advice recently that this has now already in the past been delegated to the Chief Education Officer, so we're just bringing it to yourselves to note.
Okay, well, if that has been delegated by the committee in the past, then I'm sure that's a correct statement of facts. But it would obviously always be open to the committee in future. If that item has been reserved to the head of education, it would be open to the committee if it wanted to take that responsibility back.
Bryony, did you want to come in?
Yes, it was actually on the first point that you'd made there, Alistair, Councillor Beryl, sorry. we would apply these reserve places minimally, so the sort of balance of fairness that you were talking about, you know, is managed in that way. We wouldn't be putting in place reserve places that weren't required in order to try to ensure that people for whom it's their catchment school aren't able to attend it. I suppose the second point was, I think what we would consider appropriate in the future would be to continue to bring information about this to committee for the discussion and the views to be shared. That certainly wouldn't be looking to stop doing that, because it can be helpful discussion.
Okay, is there any further questions, comments? No. If we look at the recommendations then, so we were asked to note the number of places to be reserved for the catchment area, and note that the Chief Education Officer will determine allocation of reserved places at specific year stages in each school. So we agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you. So moving on to item number 12 is the secondary school capping. And that's you again, Aileen.
Yep, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek committee's approval on the introduction of a capping of S1 numbers within our secondary schools. The requirement is necessary in light of the significant housing development, particularly within the Stirling city area, planned over the next 10 years and beyond, and to ensure that we have adequate space for catchment pupils to attend. Again, Isabel Smith, Forward Planning Officer, is here with me to answer any questions on this paper.
Councillor Barrow.
Yeah, thanks, Kabir. I had a couple of questions because I had some concerns over this paper. Could I ask whether full legal advice has been sought on the legality of this? Because I did a bit of amateur research into it, and I was looking at the requirements of Section 28 of the Education Scotland Act 1980, which gives parents the right to make a placing request, and the expectation, the default, is that the request will be granted, and there are certain statutory reasons why an education authority might not grant the request, but the bar to that is set quite high. And when you look at parental appeals, which have gone all the way to court, they're quite complicated, and sometimes the parents win, and sometimes the local authority wins. And from the cases I looked at, the parents' legal representatives and the sheriff look in some detail about the specific arrangements of that school. They look at the layout of the school, they look at perhaps recreational areas, dining areas, and there's very detailed consideration given to whether that school is, in layman's terms, full, or whether reasonable adjustment could be made to enable that placing request. So the bar is set quite high, and councils have often fallen foul of this and lost on appeal. And it looked to me as though, given that such local specifics are gone into when these cases come to court, I find it rather strange that it's seen as acceptable to apply this blanket approach to all 7 secondary schools, to apply a fairly crude formula, paragraph 210, and just say, well, that's it, that's our limit, and if any placing requests would lead to the number being exceeded, they'll be refused. So I think, I'm just querying, has full legal advice been sought on all the implications of this? Because I'm concerned that it would be open to legal challenge.
Thanks. Bryony?
The answer is yes. We've worked closely with the legal team in relation to this. And I suppose just to give a wee bit of wider context around it, well, first of all, the actual statutory right to make a placing request is not altered by this paper and this proposal that we're bringing to you. People are still in the position to make a placing request, and just as you say, the bar is set quite high, and it would be generally the case that placing requests are accepted. We are in a bit of a new context that's been developing over the last few years in terms of pressure on the capacity of more of our schools. And this move is really in light of that, in order to try to ensure that people living in the catchment area for schools are able to attend that school, just as we discussed in the last paper. The other area that's mentioned in the paper and that's highly relevant is the development work which is planned and to some extent ongoing already, and the impact of that on their school estate. So there's a number of things we'll need to be really looking at closely and considering in the next few years to try to make sure that we can plan a best value approach to the expansion of the school estate so that it's done within reasonable financial parameters as well.
Yeah, could I respond, Camina? Yeah, I'm so concerned about the stated intent of this paper being that placing requests which perhaps would have been granted in the past will not be granted, which suggests that they could have been granted. It suggests that there might have been capacity in a school, but because of this formula that's being used to place a cap on numbers, that a previously successful placement request would not be granted in future, and I don't believe that is legally correct. But anyway, I'm no expert in this area, but I could just follow up on that. St Modens is one of the schools where a cap is proposed to be imposed, and when I look at the equality and impact assessment on page 284, under religion and belief, there's nothing ticked there at all. So I'm just wondering what the case might be if the number of eligible Catholic children wanting to go into St Modens then in particular exceeded this cap that's being placed. Then what would the position be if these children couldn't go to St Modens? And it seems odd that the equality impact assessment didn't even think of addressing that.
Can I come here in
Isabel, yes,
to answer that? Thank you. Yes, thanks, Councillor Bell. So one of the reasons why we are putting in this cap is specifically to future plan, so that in the case of St Modens, the children who are baptised Roman Catholic can continue to access that education when they wish to. In fact, St Modens High School, as I'm sure you're aware, has large numbers of placing requests from pupils who aren't baptised. And in fact, we are trying to, protect the school from getting to such capacity concerns that we would then need to refuse pupils who wish to enrol and who are baptised Roman Catholic. So that is one of the main aims of this paper. It's not so much to prevent people having that right to choose, but it is to promote places at the catchment school for all of the catchment pupils who wish to enrol there. Sorry, just to follow your point, we have also done quite a bit of research in preparing this paper, Councillor Beryl, and looked at the numbers of pupils that we are expecting, to come through who are catchment pupils, and we've specifically done our best to set the maximum S1 numbers for this coming academic session to meet the needs that we foresee in terms of enrolment pupils not being refused. So the idea isn't to start refusing any catchment pupils, and we have certainly looked into that, and we will continue to look into that year on year to make sure that we don't have to refuse any of those pupils. So that is certainly what has been coming into account. And just finally, sorry, on what Bryony said as well, there is a lot of work going into the whole secondary estate because of a lot of growth, in Stirling, especially in the city area. And we are absolutely trying to look at ways of balancing out pupils and using our secondary estate as best as we can. At the moment, the projections show that some of our high schools will reach capacity if we do not do this capping exercise, which would entail big costs. But if there are options in the future to change that through catchment reviews or through any one of the tools in our arsenal, we would certainly use those. And then if we could remove the capping, we would be happy to do so and review it on an annual basis. Our aim is absolutely not to prevent anybody from putting in a placing request or having that approved where possible. It is just to future-proof the estate to prevent us having to extend buildings at high cost to the council, which may not otherwise have to be.
Thanks for that. Could I just ask, is there any work going on to analyse the reasons that the placing request, you maybe already have this information, why, the reasons that families are putting placing requests in? And is there some way, some work that could be done that could mitigate this? So, you know, is it particular subject choice, or, you know, what is the reason that people are looking at placing requests, and how many families would this affect? So you'll know yourself how many placing requests there are. So how many families potentially could this affect?
So Aileen, do you want to go in and reply first?
No, you're okay. On you go, Isabel.
So first of all, yes, we absolutely do look at why people put in placing requests. You know, as some of the councillors here and yourself may be aware, certain of our schools just happen to have very good reputations and are very enticing to parents. And we often find that when one family puts in a placing request, some of the friends might do that as well to keep with that same family. So there's a whole host of reasons why people do it. For instance, Wallace High School has an extremely good curriculum where it comes to sport and things like that, so people may choose to attend there for those particular reasons. So there are a whole host of reasons, but it certainly is something we're aware of, and we do seek to encourage pupils to consider their catchment school and to try and support them in doing that. And in terms of the number of families that are going to be affected, we haven't got all of the placing requests in yet for next academic session. The deadline for that is the 15th of March of this year. At that point, we will have a good understanding of the placing requests, as well as the number of catchment pupils who wish to go into S1 at all 7 of our schools. And that's when we'll be able to start looking at it in more detail and have an answer for you, Councillor McGill, in terms of how many families are going to be affected. We hope it's not going to be too many, but I'd be very happy to come back to you and update you on that once we have those numbers of placing requests finalised.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yeah, I shared some of the same concerns as Councillor Beryl on this. Now, I suppose on a couple of points. Now, the questions that have been asked about the legal advice that has been sought within the context of the Education Act and the specific situation of St Modens, and that there is a justification given in detail for why 3 high schools specifically should be have a cap applied, but there is very little information contained in the report about why it needs to be rolled out across the entire secondary estate. I'm kind of, I would argue that a lot of that should have been in the report, given what we're being asked to do. You know, given that we're being asked to approve this change in approach. So I would be, as a councillor, approving such a change, because it is quite significant. I would be much more comfortable having that produced in the body of a report that I'm being asked to make a decision on, if you see what I mean. I think that would be important here. So that's really, I'm sort of saying, should we be making a decision on this at this stage without having all that information incorporated into a report that covers all the aspects? My other question is, how many other local authorities in Scotland apply a cap?
So I'm probably not going to fully answer your questions. I think Isabel will be able to come in to do that. We can certainly give more information about the impact of the cap in different areas. You know, so it's not, if I'm understanding the first part of your question correctly, it won't have an equal impact in every setting. It's deliberately designed to focus on what the specific data is telling us about each secondary school, and Isabel may be able to say a little more about that. And in terms of the second point, which I'm going to have to ask you to repeat, I'm sorry.
How many other local authorities in Scotland apply a cap?
Thank you. And again, I'm not going to be able to give you a detailed answer. What I can tell you is that we have looked closely at other local authorities who have applied a cap in terms of the work that we've undertaken to get to this position. So, you know, it is a an approach which is used elsewhere, and that has been supportive to us in developing the plan. Isabella, are you able to come in with a bit more detail?
Yes, absolutely. Councillor Earl, the reason that we applied this to all of the schools was to have a consistent approach across all of our estate and also again for future planning. To be perfectly honest with you, the current caps in the schools that are under less pressure are high enough that they won't actually have an impact in the coming academic year, because simply we don't expect as many S1 pupils to want to go there. So they will be sitting well within the proposed caps. The caps just came out of applying that formula, and if we do see growth in those schools, those caps may in a certain number of years come into effect. With regards to your second question, I can certainly look for you how many councils across Scotland do it. We are aware that Glasgow City Council, for example, have now introduced caps for all of their S1s as well as all of their P1s. Again, that was supported by their committees, and we've worked very closely with them in developing our proposal. They found themselves in a similar situation to us, with some of their schools under extremely high capacity pressures, but absolutely I will look in to the whole of Scotland, and I'll be able to provide you with that answer after this meeting.
And Isabel, can I ask, do some local authorities apply caps on some of their schools and but not on all?
Again, from the example of Glasgow, I know that they did a blanket approach, just like us, and applied the cap, as I said, to all S1s and P1s. But again, I will look into that for you and provide you with that answer, whether anyone has taken the approach of just doing it to some schools.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, for letting me come back in. Yeah, I'm even more puzzled then as to why we're doing this, because the committee is being asked to approve this. So we're approving, I guess, a change in policy. I think if this is a change in policy, I don't understand what the change is, because without the cap, it's already open to the local authority to refuse a placing request on the grounds that that particular school is full. And in future, with the cap, that'll be the same argument. So I don't understand why that represents a change in policy, because there is no change. If a parent makes a placing request and it can be accommodated, then it will be currently, and it will continue to be granted, I guess. And if the request can't be accommodated because the school is full, well, it will currently be refused because the school is full, and in future it'll be refused on the grounds that the school is full. So what's different? How does this represent a new policy?
So the new policy is in having a capping process, which is more than just looking at the school to see is it full, and in terms of reserved places, it has a bit of a more future focus on the knowledge we have about the planned capacity of the school beyond the immediate year. So it does allow the authority to then apply this bit of policy along with the other policy in relation to reserved places and so on when considering placing requests. So it is an addition to our current policy.
Can I also just add a wee bit to that, please, Bryony, if that's okay with you and Chair? Thank you. I'll just give an example. Because our schools are currently not sitting at that full capacity, but we know that there is this growth. Without this capping policy that we're suggesting, a school could, for instance, have enough room to take up to 12 full S1 classes, which would represent 240 pupils. So it may be that this year's that's possible, but as those pupils move through the school, it's only possible because, for instance, the S4 currently this year is only sitting at 80 pupils, let's say, or even 150. But as those 240 pupils that we could potentially take, because the other year groups are a bit lower, as they move through the school, it's just not going to keep being possible to take as many and to offer them an appropriate curriculum as they move through the school. If we continue to do that year on year, that would then cause capacity problems. Without the capping, we're able to decide based on 1 year's data, whether or not we can take that placing request. This is just to give us the opportunity to think a little bit further ahead and make sure that that school can keep providing the curriculum that it can to all of its pupils. And we certainly wouldn't want to end up in a situation where, because we've taken so many pupils 1 year, the following year, there's just much less capacity in the school overall. And then we start having to seriously look at refusing catchment pupils because we've taken a huge intake this academic session. We wouldn't want to then be in a position to have to dramatically reduce that in following years, which, as I say, would affect those catchment pupils who may need to move elsewhere.
Yeah, Kabina, I hesitate to argue the point when obviously I don't have the personal knowledge and understanding of this, but from my limited understanding, I thought it was already perfectly permissible to take into account not just the situation in the current year, or the year relating to the placing request, but the authority is entitled already to look at what might happen in future years as a result of taking in that intake in S1.
I think this makes it a more planned process. And you know, looking to the future rather than anecdotally as maybe what it's been doing year on year at the moment. Bryony.
I suppose I just wanted to say that, you know, the points you made earlier on, Councillor Beryl, about this being legally challengeable and the appeals that take place in relation to placing requests, you're absolutely right that that does happen and it does result in decisions being overturned. And this bit of additional policy definitely clarifies the position. At the moment, I think without it, it would be more open to that legal challenge than it would be in the future with this policy in place.
Kabina, could I give notice of an amendment, please?
Yes. Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I think this has been really interesting. I mean, I think my general point will be that we are being asked to change. It's a policy change. We are being asked to approve the principle of roll capping, which can be quite a contentious and challenged position for a local authority to be in, and we are being asked to make that decision. And I note from the rest of the report, then we'd be the findings or the results or that will be report back to the committee on an annual basis, but we wouldn't be asked on an annual basis to approve the process again each year, if you see what I mean. Once we've agreed the principle of roll capping, we've agreed the principle of roll capping, and the decisions that will flow from that will obviously be delegated down to officers to carry out, as is quite right. What I would suggest is that I would want, as a councillor being asked to do this, I would want to see more information in the body of the official report that I am being asked to approve this on. Because that in itself the line will trace back to this report from a point of view of any challenges in the future, from a point of view of how the decision was made. And I would want to see much more in this report about the legal advice that has been taken, about the position at St Modens and the rationale for that, about the rationale as to why all schools, not just an individual three, are capped. And so I'd just like to see much more information in the report before I'm asked to approve something. That's all.
Thank you for that, Councillor Errol. Councillor Brisley.
Yeah, I'm a wee bit concerned as well in terms of the whole idea is to protect schools from house building in particular. And yet the bulk of the house building, and some of it's already started and planning consent's already given for a number of developments that are going to affect Bannockburn High School. Huge numbers of young people. And yet there's no mention of that. I mean, we're talking about 1,101 development, 3,200 in another, 500 in Cowie, 500 in Pleen, all of which would affect, I'm presuming, the Bannockburn High School catchment area, and there doesn't. I worry that by limiting the cap, I know the building will take place slowly, even when the builders start to build, but there's nothing mentioned about this area. I would have liked to see something about the impact on the schools in the local area.
Thank you. Isabel, you have your hand up.
Yes, Councillor Brisley. Just to reassure you that we're doing extremely extensive work on those big developments that are happening in the Bannockburn catchment, as you rightly mentioned. That work is ongoing together with the planners, and we're just beginning a piece of work now where we're building out different scenarios to understand. We're pretty clear that a new school will need to be built to accommodate all of those pupils. We believe that will happen around 2030, 2031, if the current build-out rates that the developers are providing us with are correct. So we are looking at primary as well as secondary, the impact on the Bannockburn catchment. That is, as I say, an extensive piece of work because of the numbers issuing from these new developments. So we are very aware of that, and we have everything in place at this point, and we'll continue to work on it to make sure that there is sufficient capacity to accommodate all of the pupils from new development as they come. It won't be a question of refusing them education. It's our statutory duty to educate anybody who lives within Stirling Council area boundaries, and we are looking forward to that and are confident that we will be able to meet those demands.
Okay, so we have a notice of amendment. Should we?
Sorry, could I just butt in if I may? Yeah, I had prepared. I drafted as a written amendment. Some aspects of that have been overtaken by events from the debate and the questioning and the answering. My amendment now, I think, would just be that I would ask the committee to agree to defer this issue until we have the further information that was outlined by Councillor Earl about aspects of the legal advice we were given, where that's not confidential, and about the potential impact on St Modens and some of the aspects that Councillor Brisley raised as well. So my amendment would simply be to ask the committee to defer this item until a more detailed report can be brought forward to the committee.
So can I ask the committee if that's something that they want to do? It seems quite reasonable, but I don't know what effect that would have on the school intake for next year. How would that affect your planning, Bryony?
Apologies. Yes, just a minute to get my mic off there. Yes, I mean, obviously we're moving to do this at a time where we're judging from our data, etc., that it would be helpful to be able to apply these caps for next year's intake, and given the committee cycle and the election and so on, that will present a delay to us. However, you know.
Okay, Councillor Brisley.
Yeah, just I think in a lot of ways I might be happier if it was deferred, you know, just to give us a wee bit more time to have fuller information. I think it might be nice for the officers to have the caps in place for this year, but as we've never had caps before, and we've always managed quite successfully, I don't think it would create too much of a disadvantage not to introduce this at this stage.
Okay. Councillor Tolamash.
Yes, it was really to say that we haven't had caps before. So please can I ask a question which is linked to the amendment. And the question is, if we don't have the cap and a school gets to capacity, then there will be a communication to a person who wants to go to that school that the school has reached capacity. Is that the case?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So we would be looking to alternatively
okay.
place these young people.
So in fact, we could cope for this next year on the basis that we did last year then.
Bryony, did you want to come in there?
Just to say that, yes, absolutely, we are able to cope as we have done in previous years, but we haven't had a capping process in place before because we've not been in the degree of pressure on school capacities that we currently are in before. And the judgment to come with this paper has been because of that increased pressure on capacities overall in schools. So the risk, I suppose, we would face is that we would begin to see catchment young people not able to attend specific schools because either now or in future years, but we're talking about bringing the paper back, we're talking about a short-term delay. So yes, we would cope. Yes, we brought it forward for a good, well-analysed reason, but that's my point really only.
Okay. Councillor Errol.
Yeah, I just think actually it's a reasonable point about the cycle we're at, because actually I think this is something, given it's a policy change, we've never had it before. It would also be more appropriate if this came back to maybe the first meeting of a new council that is in place for 4 years, that has a new set of, whoever the councillors are existing and some new ones, but there's an ownership for taking a decision of this nature maybe at the start of a council cycle as well.
Okay, any other comments? So as a committee then saying we would like to defer this paper.
Agreed.
Okay, so we're agreed we'll defer the paper. Okay, so moving on then we have school transport policy review, and that's you again, Aileen.
Yeah, thank you. The purpose of this paper is to clarify 2 areas which are currently part of our policy but not clearly written within the policy document. The first change is to bring our policy into line with what we currently do in terms of allocating home to school transport. Transport is currently and always has been allocated from one address. It would not be possible for us to provide transport from multiple addresses. However, this has not been clearly written within our policy. Parents currently provide a main carer for communication with schools, and this carer's address is the one that is currently used when allocating home to school transport. The second change is to simply have written in our policy that additional support needs transport can be provided by both in-house council transport or by a contract with an external operator. Again, Isabel Smith is with me to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Twilmash, you've got your hand up right away there. You got a question?
I do, and it's slightly a technical question because we have track changes on our paper, and I find that slightly confusing. And it perhaps would, in retrospect, have been okay, but if we didn't have the track changes. So I think that's been addressed by what's been said. So if we could just say what are the changes that are in place compared to what the paper was before. So what is the changes to the policy that are compared to the previous one? Thank you.
I think that's just been highlighted, but Isabel, do you want just to go over that again, please?
Absolutely. Councillor Tolomaki, we were asked previously, and I think it was by Councillor Earl, if I remember correctly, last time we brought the transport policy where we hadn't added the track changes. We were asked by Councillor Earl, I remember this very well, to bring the track changes. So just a wee explanation there as to why that was included. I'm sorry that format made it a bit harder for you to read through. So just to go over the 2 changes, they aren't actually changes to practice. They're just about clarifying the wording in the policy. So change number 1 is just to make it clear that we are only able to offer transport from the one address. This is in cases, where potentially a family is separated, if the 2 parents or carers live at different addresses. And we have requests every so often just to be able to transport potentially on a part-time basis, half the week or so on, the pupil to one address and to another. But in practice, it's always been the case that we aren't able to do that, and those are for financial reasons, just because it would significantly increase the amount of transport that would need to be provided, which would obviously come as a cost to the council. However, the good news is, I'm sure you're all aware that there's the under 22 card now, where actually young people are able to travel for free on public transport that's running where they want to go. So that will alleviate, some of the concerns around this. And the second change was just to add in that we now provide some of the ASN transport in-house rather than through external contractors. So it was just to update the policy to include that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrow.
Yeah, thanks, Gabina. Yeah, I just want to check my understanding then of the current policy practice versus this proposed new one, because I'm concerned for many of my rural constituents live in villages or settlements where there is no bus service. So having a free bus for being under 22 is going to be no help to many of them. So to take an example, suppose a child lives part-time with a parent in Fintry and part-time with a parent in Drimmen, no bus services to either of those villages. Does that mean that only one bus pass or Stirling Council will provide transport from only one of those addresses? Say it was Fintry. Does that mean on the days the child is living with a parent in Drimmen, that the council won't provide transport? Have I understood that correctly? That was good. If I have understood correctly, that's going to create enormous difficulties for some families.
Isabel, you still have a hand up, but I see Aileen's put her hand up as well, so either or.
You go for Aileen.
Yeah, so you are correct, but that is the policy that is currently in place, so it's not going to create any new challenges for these families. And just on a point of note on the travel entitlement card, although it can be used on bus services, it can also be used on the DRT system. So young people who live in the rural area can access DRT system with that pass.
Sorry, if I understood you correctly, you're saying that there's no change in policy, and yet we're being
no. So the change to the policy is to write clearly what we currently do in practice. So previously that hasn't been written in the policy, so we've added it, but it is the policy that we currently adopt, we use, and we work to.
So in accordance with the policy as it's currently written, I assume some parents must have appealed against this and said, well, why can't my child have a transport arranged from Fintry, from Drimmen, or whatever the case may be? There must have been challenges or appeals against the current practice, even if it wasn't in the policy. Is that correct?
We actually, sorry, is that okay if I answer?
Yes, certainly.
We have very few. Actually, I don't think we've had any official challenges to it at all. We do every year have, I suppose, a couple. The numbers are very low of parents who inquire whether it would be possible to get 2 bus passes due to their particular circumstances. The policy has always said, and you will be able to see it written black on white, that we cannot take family circumstances into account. In fact, we go back to these parents and we very kindly and explain to them that the council only provides the 1 bus pass to entitled pupils, and we haven't had any parents really come back and as I say, challenge that officially. The policy always has to make those decisions. They are sometimes difficult, but as I say, we in the policy, it does say we don't take those family circumstances into account, and a lot of our other decisions, for instance, awarding parental mileage contracts and things like that, can also prove to be tricky for some parents. But as I say, the policy does set out those decisions, always bearing in mind the financial impact on the council of providing that transport.
Aileen, you have your hand up as well there.
Yeah, it was just to share maybe some experience we have had of that recently within Councillor Beryl's constituency area, where although we're not able to provide 2 passes, we have had capacity on vehicles, which has meant that we've been able to give a privilege pass for the second route. And we've done that relatively recently for a family in a situation that's very similar to the one that you described. So we can't, by policy, offer 2 places, but if there are space on the other vehicle, then we can offer a privilege pass there.
Did you want to come back in on that, Councillor Beryl?
Oh yes, thanks, Gabina. Yeah, and the privilege pass presumably has to be paid for. By the
No,
family.
there is no charge for privilege pass now.
Okay, oh, that sounds reasonable then. If there is capacity on the bus and a child is allowed to use it anyway, even if it's strictly speaking against policy, that sounds reasonable. Thanks.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, convener. I want to ask about the appropriate vetting of drivers and escorts. I take it that that is an enhanced disclosure, and also I think that's relatively easy to enforce with in-house drivers, but with external contractors, do we have a means of monitoring and enforcing that provision?
Bryony or Aileen?
Yes. Yes, sorry, I see Aileen put her hand up, and as usual she may be able to give more detail than I'm going to give, but absolutely yes, we have a process in place where our drivers and escorts are PVG checked as they need to be, and it's through working with our transport team colleagues that there's quality assurance and checks and balances in place about those PVG checks. They work very closely with all the operators.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything, Aileen?
Not really, other than, yeah, just to confirm what Brian is saying and to say that, so in terms of the PVG checking, there is no difference between our in-house operators or our external contractors. The same process is followed.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Dodds.
Thank you. Just moving on slightly from that. When you have an outside contractor, is it the same driver? Because sometimes drivers change through sickness, alternative routes, whatever personal circumstances. So is the whole company, do they provide the necessary checks, or one specific driver allocated to that contract? So what happens if he falls sick and they provide an alternative immediately on that day? Is that person PVC checked?
I don't think. Sorry, I don't think that's part of this paper, because that's existing policy at the moment. But if Aileen or Isabel want to answer that.
Yeah, happy to answer that. Yes, the contractors that we use have all drivers that they will use on the routes PVG checked. So we would never have a driver who wasn't PVG checked. There may be drivers within the company who are not, but they wouldn't be used to for home to school transport.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions? No. So we've been asked in the recommendations to approve the changes to the school transport policy. Are we happy with the recommendation? Yes. Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item 14 is the developed curriculum pathways, and that's yourself, Ali, I think.
That's yeah. Hi there. Ali McLeod, Service Manager, Senior Phase and Youth Participation. The purpose of this report is to present to committee information on the breadth of qualifications currently being delivered in Stirling secondary schools. The report covers a number of different types of qualifications, such as national qualifications, national progression awards, skills for works, and it also explains some partnerships, such as our partnership with Forth Valley College, and it also includes some innovative approaches currently taking place within 3 of our secondary schools. Committee is asked to consider and note the curriculum updates. Be happy to answer any questions on the paper.
Thank you. I was quite surprised the shortness of this paper, because I know from my children's point of view there's a wealth of opportunity, far more than ever was available when I was at school. So anyway, I'll open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Errol.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, no, welcome the paper. Thank you. Interesting information there. I suppose my question is, is there any focused work going on at developing the shared curriculum that I know has been discussed before about, you know, certain schools hosting certain higher or particularly advanced higher courses, maybe to expand the offering that is then able to be accessed by pupils across the other secondary school estate?
Yeah, so we currently have, well, I suppose two things. So we currently have a number of subjects who offer a consortium model for schools where pupils physically will go and attend. There tends to be advanced hires in another school. We have got a pilot in place for next session. So there's currently a curriculum offer within our schools for, I think it's 5 advanced hires initially to be offered mostly remotely. One of the difficulties with the consortium offer, the traditional consortium offer, is around the geographical locations of different schools in Stirling. So we're piloting next session 5 advanced higher courses, which will enable pupils to access the vast majority of those courses either 100% remotely, or some of the models include possibly a day a term where the cohort would come together with the teacher. So yeah, we're excited about piloting that, and we hope if the learning is successful and the evaluation from the young people in particular is that is an effective way of learning. We are focusing on an advanced hire due to the, I suppose, the individual responsibility that learning comes with. So we are hoping that will be a model that we can continue to build on in future.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really interesting. I'd like to just be kept advised on that, because I think that's really starting to make inroads into what we've been talking about for a few years. So that's really good to hear. And I take your point about advanced hires from that sort of top down, if you like, from a point of view, individual responsibility to progress. So I suppose that does actually open up that model to delivery of courses by schools out with the Stirling Council area, you know, potentially.
It does, absolutely, it does potentially. I think at the moment they are, I suppose the reason we're piloting and we've deliberately kept the number of courses fairly small is around the logistics of potential workload, for example, on teachers. So one of the things by keeping that, we've kind of focused on advanced higher courses which don't run in every school at the moment. So, for example, advanced higher computing, one of our schools is delivering that remotely, which was probably only delivered in 2 or 3 of our other schools. We've got advanced higher business studies, similar model, advanced higher statistics, which was only delivered in 1 or 2 of our schools. So the idea being that by one school taking responsibility for that, I suppose it does 2 things. It provides an opportunity for all our young people to have that equity as far as an advanced higher suite, but it also takes and frees up potential curriculum opportunities in the schools that aren't delivering that, as obviously it creates additional teacher time. So there's hopefully potential there. But absolutely, there's potential also to link with partners within the RIC in future to see if that model can be developed further. But I suppose it's at the moment it's kind of trial and error in order to see what the benefits and also what the potential, largely from a staffing point of view, how we make sure that a really important part of this is that staff feel supported and that the numbers of pupils on the courses are manageable as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. Thanks for that.
Councillor Tomash.
Okay, thank you. On page 326, the vocation, okay, the training centre, that looks a great thing that's been done at that school. So my question is, what way is that being replicated in the other schools? Because that clearly is a thing that offers pupils a training, the experience, and it would be useful for that to be put into other schools. So my question: what's the progress, or what's the plans to have that kind of thing put into other schools? Thank you.
I think there's different models of delivering vocational learning. The St Modens model, the purpose-built model of that as part of the school, which I had the privilege of visiting a few months ago, and it does deliver bespoke courses. I think similar courses are being offered elsewhere within our schools, depending on the context. So one of the examples was High Apprenticeship, in-house apprenticeship scheme, delivers similar vocational experiences. We have a couple of our schools who are working really closely with Forth Valley College. So Forth Valley College lecturers are coming in and delivering construction courses, for example. So the vocational learning aspect absolutely has taken place within all our secondary schools to an extent, depending on the context and the need and the appropriateness within the pupils within each school. So although the model at St Modens has that sort of custom-built aspect of the school, the actual vocational courses and learning on offer are similar opportunities for young people, but possibly delivered in a different way or through different partnerships.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's no further questions. So we've been asked to consider and note the curriculum updates in the report. Are we happy to agree that we've done that? Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of the education business, and it's just after 12:30. So I think we should take a break. I'd like to thank everybody that's not going to return to the latter half of the meeting for their participation over the last few years. And so I think the minimum we can take 10 minutes. We could take more if people want. What are people thinking? 15 minutes maybe? How long does it take to boil a kettle? 15 minutes. That's putting his thumbs up. Okay, so we'll see you back here just, we'll say 10 to 1. That's 17 minutes. Okay.
Thanks.
actually quite good having your reports all separate. Right, thank you very much. So welcome back everybody to the second half. So this is children and children's social services section. Could we just do a roll call of the members, please, David?
Yeah, will do. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Beryl.
Present.
Councillor Brisley.
Present.
Councillor Earl.
Present.
Councillor Farmer.
I think Councillor Farmer had to leave to go to another meeting, so give his apologies.
Okay, and we have apologies from Councillor Dodds as well and Councillor Houston. Councillor McGill.
I'm here.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
And Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, and we still have a quorum. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we're now on to item 15, and this is a report on the inspection in Brucefield Care Home. And that's you, Alex, going to present this?
That's right. Alexandra Bergen, Service Manager for Resources within Children and Families and Justice. So the purpose of the report has been to make the committee aware of the recently published report on Brucefield Care Home Service by the Care Inspectorate. The inspection took place on the 29th, or was completed on the 29th of October 2021. I think in the previous reports you've heard about what the different gradings mean, and the gradings that we received on these key questions were all good. So it was, how well do we support children and young people's wellbeing, and how well is our care planned? So hopefully you'll have seen from the report that there were a number of areas of real strength, a couple of areas for improvement, and no recommendations. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks, Alex. The report mentions staff throughout, and I'm aware that in Brucefield the staff really have went above and beyond to provide a safe, nurturing environment for the young people living there through the pandemic. And I'm just wondering if you could, I mean, it mentions it briefly in the report, but I'm just wondering if you could maybe outline to the committee an example of that commitment.
Okay, I'm really pleased you've mentioned that, because although obviously we're pleased that we've received good comments, in actual fact, I don't feel that that does reflect the dedication of the staff team and what they've done across that period. So in the earlier part of the pandemic, all of the shift patterns were changed, which did have a very big impact on staff members seeing their own family, but made a big difference for the young people in that real time of uncertainty and isolation for lots of young people, that they had that continuity. And that has continued. But I think it's worth mentioning that just prior to Christmas, people will be aware of the very acute crisis in the care sector and the concerns that the Omicron variant had in impacting on staff's availability, even if it wasn't with serious illness. And we had a number of services across Scotland and in our area who were reporting real acute staffing shortages. And it's just worth noting that all of our staff, we were able to get volunteers, so that in the event that we had significant numbers of staffing absence, people would live in throughout the isolation period to keep the home open and to keep continuity for those children. And it's not something that people would ordinarily know about, and unfortunately it didn't happen, but that would be people offering to be in there for 10 days during that period, which I think is exceptional.
Yes, absolutely. So as the convener of this committee and as a corporate parent, I would like to put on record my thanks to the staff for their dedication. And I think I can probably speak for the rest of the committee in saying that. So just to yeah, Councillor Earls put his thumb up there. So I'd just like to have that recorded, because I think that is quite exceptional. So I'll open up to questions now. So Councillor Tolamash.
Okay, please, please, can I join you, Susan? Okay, I will agree with your comments. The question that I have, you seem to be disappointed with the gradings. And have you put your feelings back to the inspectors?
Yes, we went back to had a meeting with our link inspector and discussed those, and also put points of reference back to them. And I think, and I know Marie's raised her hand in relation to this, but there has been some national discussion, including from the Care Inspectorate themselves, about a changed approach to gradings and a perception that they had previously graded too highly and that they wish to be more stringent in their instructions, in their grading.
Okay.
Unfortunately, their response, I should just say, was not to change.
Yeah. Marie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so Marie Valenti, Senior Manager, Children and Families and Justice Social Work. So yes, just to reinforce what Alex has said, at the Chief Social Work Officers meeting, it was basically communicated that there is a sense that the gradings for the residential establishments are reducing post-COVID, and that similarly to nurseries, that the bar has gone up and that the approach has shifted. So by way of reassurance, again, I have a meeting with my link inspector, who's a strategic inspector, this Friday, and I plan to raise that and explore that with her then. So just to absolutely reinforce what you've said, I am very proud of the service that those staff deliver to those children and young people. I think that their experience and positivity is reflected in the report, and that is what's most important. Those children are well cared for, and they live in a warm and loving environment, and that is what matters. And for all of those good grades are something to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I don't know whether, convener, we could, as a committee, if we all agree, convey that feeling back ourselves. Thank you.
I think what I would be asking, and I mean, really, it's a number at the end of the day, isn't it? It doesn't really matter what the number is. I would like the inspectors, the Care Commission, to articulate more across the board what they've done, because I mean, as I say, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the score is. It's what's happening on the ground, and if they're wanting to change the parameters a wee bit, that's fine, all very well. But let's communicate that out so as everybody's aware, and you don't get that kind of feeling, oh well, that doesn't reflect as being really good when they've just altered the parameters a wee bit. So I think I'd be asking that, because it's the same with the nurseries. So aye. Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, convener. I'd just like to endorse what's already been said. I think that the young people who are resident in Brucefield have probably through a great deal of their lives have lived in a climate of uncertainty and in some cases fear. And to get the comment that a child or young person feels safe in an environment, I think is a great accolade and a great achievement. And I think that should be recognised. And would it be pointless for the committee to communicate that to the inspectors? But that's one of my thoughts. The other one is that in the light of what we heard this morning, in this morning's presentation, I note that the inspector saw positive examples of care and support taking account of different cultures, language and religion. And again, I think that's another accolade to the staff. So it's just a shame that that's not being reflected in the inspector's reports, because I think it's a great achievement, and I would certainly like that to be passed on to staff members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I would agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. I would simply add that what I expect the Care Inspectorate to be consistent. That's what I expect, and I think that's what everybody should expect. So if they've adjusted and whatever, then okay, but that has to be consistent across the board, and the recommendations and the areas for improvement have to be commensurate with what they are grading. And so, you know, there's got to be a reason for putting that criteria in the box, and that's what I'd expect to see. And I think we as a committee, or future iterations of this committee, just have to have a mind on this. And when if we're seeing what we feel to be inconsistencies, we should be taking that back to the Care Inspectorate as a committee, I think, because you know, I think we would expect that consistency to be brought before us.
I think it's really important to note that we do, we're never complacent as a service, and I think the areas for improvement that have been highlighted, we would acknowledge some of those. None of them are recommendations, so they're none of them urgent issues. But we've already started to take on some of those areas, the recommendations, and just as Councillor Simpson noted about some of the cultural sensitivities and differences, we've been really fortunate in developing more services in that area, and we will ultimately be employing a worker to cover some of the supports that young people who've come as unaccompanied asylum seekers, for example, might require.
Okay, thank you. I really wanted to ask, you meant the report mentions Mind of My Own app. I just wondered if you could maybe explain a little bit about that and how that works.
Okay, that's an app for young people who can access it as one of the strands of one of the ways in which they can communicate their views. It can be used in education or for meetings, and certainly for young people where language is an issue, it can be a useful thing. And I think you've talked quite extensively earlier on in the meeting about young males who may be more reluctant to communicate either face to face or in a meeting. And certainly some young people over the last 2 years have found benefits from doing these meetings online, but others have found it excruciating. And to be sitting in a large meeting when we're talking about somebody's care plan, to put them on the spot and to say, what do you want? And please, can you articulate it perfectly in a room full of professionals who aren't even physically near you is very difficult. But that is only one of a suite of ways of seeking young people's views. So we would still encourage advocacy and support and using the person who knows the young person well and who they want to represent them.
Okay. So does the committee want to formally approach the Care Inspectorate, and how's the best way to go about that? Because Marie, you said you're going to have some discussions with them. Is that something that you feel you would want to take back the views of the committee, or do we need to do something more structured?
I'm happy to do that. I'm meeting with, I have a very good link inspector, and she's very well experienced. So I am more than happy to take forward on Friday my views about this, and also say that it was echoed and represented by this committee. Happy to do that.
Yeah. And would you be able to feedback any feedback that you get from that then? Yeah.
Happy to do that, absolutely.
Thank you, thank you. So we're asked in the recommendations to consider and note the contents of the report. Have we agreed we've done that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So moving on, then we have item number 16, which is the Stirling's Corporate Parenting and the Promise Plan 2021-24. Is that yourself, Morven?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it's Marie Valenti and I will co-present this, and I've got a short presentation to share with committee. I'm the lead officer for the Promise in Stirling. Would you like me to start with the short presentation and then we can talk more generally?
That would be good, thank you.
2 seconds and I'll just share my screen. Hope that can be seen by everybody now.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So good morning. This is a short presentation to demonstrate how our corporate parenting and Promise Plan 21-24 has been co-produced with relevant stakeholders, including children and young people, parents and carers, staff and partner agencies, and to acknowledge what more we need to do to involve those with lived experience in our service planning and redesign. So as you'll know, the plan is broken down according to the 5 priority areas outlined in the Promise 21-24. This is also referred to as the bedding down phase of the 10-year change programme. Co-production is a key principle in the Promise, and so we have sought to collaborate and identify our actions and activities within each priority area, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. This slide shows some of the ways that we've collaborated and co-produced with different stakeholder groups. Some of these you'll be very familiar with, the Champions Board and the Young Ambassadors Group, who are established groups of young people who are regularly consulted about various issues. Other groups, including the Parent and Carers Focus Group, were brought together for a specific purpose, but have indirectly contributed to our priorities and actions within our plan. We've also arranged a number of specific Promise-focused consultation sessions, and I'll continue to facilitate these across more areas of council and with external partners on a regular basis. We're aware that there are still voices we have yet to hear from, and we're developing links with partner agencies to do inclusive outreach to more marginalised groups and individuals to ensure their needs and experiences shape our service redesign. And this should be visible in our progress updates and the next iteration of our corporate parenting and Promise Plan. So going back to the key priority areas, for a good childhood, I felt the most appropriate examples were the ones from our Champions Board, who provided rich and moving examples of their own lived experience and what they wanted to see change and evolve. These images are their written contributions during co-production workshops, and the bullet points adjacent are the specific actions arising in our plan, directly informed by the champions. We did a feedback session to them earlier in January, which was received very positively. So we'll be including regular feedback sessions for all our co-production partners in future. In terms of whole family support, we did lots of co-production across our service and with external partners, but again, I've chosen to focus on the contributions of those with lived experience, our Champions Young People's written examples again, and the results from the surveys that parents and carers who co-produced the family and parenting support strategy, which aligns very well with the Promise principles of whole family support. That enabled us to identify what we needed to change in our delivery model to ensure our services and supports are accessible and non-stigmatising, to improve how families can interact with them and benefit most from them. In the section on supporting the workforce, as you can imagine, we've consulted extensively with staff about what they feel they need to achieve the ambitions in the Promise. They've helped us identify gaps in knowledge and expertise, resource allocation issues, and creative ways to redevelop systems of support for children and families, but also within our own organisation for the benefit of staff wellbeing and to support relationship-based and trauma-informed practice. Many of their suggestions chimed with what young people told us they wanted and needed from their corporate parents too. So we've listened and have invested in recruitment and development for staff, including the corporate parenting e-learning module, and that is being heavily promoted at the moment. And that was co-produced with the Stirling Champions Board. In this slide, the graphic at the top gives a flavour of the co-production that we've done with external partners in this area of the plan. In addition to what's represented here, though, we did consult with Addiction Services, the NHS Forth Valley, Skills Development Scotland, Forth Valley College, Stirling University, Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. We've got an active group of young people working with our Children's Rights Officer who are co-producing the child-friendly complaints process, and we'll be sharing that with all the aforementioned partners once that's complete. We recognise we've only just begun our co-production and service redesign journey. We're still developing our methodology and approach, and that's part of our learning process as we learn together to deliver the Promise. Building capacity is a section that relates more to the national policies and scaffolding around a promise. And at Stirling Council, we're continuing to consult the Promise Scotland team regularly to inform and help us implement and plan how we use the Scottish approach to service design within our work. We hope to achieve is represented in this illustration by an artist from the Champions Board, which is a representation of a system of support based on love and nurture. And in all my presentations on the promise, I include a slide to show how you can help to keep the promise. As I've already mentioned, the corporate parenting e-learning module is now on Milo. That's accessible for all corporate parents to complete, but has been made mandatory for all staff at team leader level and above. It's been the e-learning module of the month this month, and we'll see what the uptake and completion data is like at the end of this month, but it will be an ongoing expectation for staff to access and complete this. As part of that corporate parenting module, the letter from the Champions Board is within there. So if you would like to see that again and to respond to it, you can. I'll also be making sure that the corporate parenting pledge postcards are sent out to all members after this meeting if you haven't already received them. And finally, this is to be continued because this plan's only the start of our journey to achieve the changes our young people and their families need and deserve. We intend to include and involve them more and more as we implement this plan and as we develop our future plans for the next phase of work. And I've finished here with an image of the window of the Home and Belonging building decorated by our champions as part of the Window Wonderland event and the Tending the Light Festival of Care, which took place last week. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you, Morgan. I just wondered about the e-learning module. I don't know what Milo is. Are you able, is there a way you can send a link to the members of the committee for us to complete it?
Yes, so Milo's the online learning platform which hosts all the virtual sort of learning modules, e-learning modules. And I know there's a lot of them are for councillors, so I'm sure most of you will have accessed some of them in the past, but I'll make sure that we send a link around so that's easy to access.
Having access and being able to access are a wee bit different.
Okay, no problem, I'll make a note of that.
I wouldn't know where to start looking for it, so if I have it in my email, then I would be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's no problem at all.
So thanks for that presentation. A lot of work being done. You're getting on quite a pace. I would just like to say, when I was reading the report, I was delighted to see on page 369 the work that's been done and just that change in perspective, particularly when reports are being writing to the young person rather than about them. And it's such a simple thing to do, but it's so effective. So I was really pleased to see that. I was delighted to see, the celebrations of the 21st birthdays and things like that. And also something that's been a desire of mine for a long, long time is to work closely with foster carers to promote the importance of keeping in touch, because there's very few people that leave home and never ever go back, never ever phone their mums and dads or their carers, whatever. And that's obviously been a part that's been missing for these young people. So I was delighted to see that. Yeah, I think that was all that, and the e-learning module, I think that was only kind of specific comments. I'll open up if anybody else has got any other questions. Councillor Tolama.
Thank you. On page 393, okay, I'm still supported when I become, okay, the adult. And I think actually going to what you've just said, convener, so I have children, and my contact with my children did not stop when they left school. It is still going on today. And isn't it crucial that we find a way of continuing that relationship with people? And I just wanted to know what we can do extra to what we're doing at the moment to do that.
I think it's a tricky one because we're trying to change the culture in a way. We know what it looks and feels like with our own children, and it's about making people see the link that we owe it and need to be as responsive to our care experienced young people. And they've got lots of ideas about what that looks like, it feels like to them as well. But really it's about valuing them, giving them the opportunities that you would for your own. So it's about, as a council, making sure we're including them in our in all service areas for considering employability, ensuring that they're not stigmatised or discriminated against. So there's invisible barriers to do with careism that we need to be dismantling and be really active in challenging and dismantling those. And the young people want, you know, choices. So it's about us having a range of provisions available. We've seen that already in earlier papers today about education provision and the extracurricular opportunities that exist now. It's about giving our children and young people a sort of menu of options really for when they leave home, and that there are safeguards and safety nets in place, because if they do move into sort of more independent living, about them having the opportunity to try and fail without it being a devastating, traumatic event. You know, if they go into their own tenancies, we need to be able to make sure that there's a mechanism where they don't sort of end up in arrears and homeless, for example. So it's about making sure that we're always backing up our young people's choices with other opportunities and the chance to learn and develop in the way that we want our own children to, which includes failing and trying again.
Yeah, and I mean, I know a while ago we had spoke about corporate parents, and that's what the young people are asking. They're wanting their corporate parents to be more visible, more involved with them. And we had looked at doing a kind of linkish type arrangement, sort of speed dating almost, by getting to know them. But that's never happened because of COVID. So hopefully now that we're maybe coming out the other end of COVID, that we could maybe pick that up, because that would definitely give a link to the decision makers, I suppose, for the young people, and build that relationship. Sorry.
Just wanted to respond to that and say, you know, they are so keen to have people come and visit their home and belonging space. So if anybody hasn't already, please do, because they're very proud of that space and they've got loads of creative ideas about how they want to use that to promote more of the promise work as well. So for example, the brothers and sisters work, they're already looking at timetabling and using their building to provide safe, supported spaces for groups of brothers and sisters to get together. And they're trying to put together a programme of activities involving our corporate parenting partners, so Active Stirling and Police Scotland, for example, to provide a range of positive activities that children can choose. That's what they want to do when they're with their brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. So I'm really, really proud of what they're already achieving at that building, and anybody that can take the time to go along and find out more from the horse's mouth, they would be very welcome.
It's a lovely space. It's certainly kitted out very well. It's very comfortable. Yeah. I see Alexandra and Marie both have their hands up at this point. Do you want to come in on this?
I wonder if I could just make a couple of comments on what Morven had said, because she's absolutely right about that cultural change. And I think some of that has been historically affected by what have been seen as safeguards for that delineation between the private and the professional. And what we're seeing or hearing from young people and their families is that need to not always have those same lines, to be able to say that we do provide love that goes beyond the job. But I also wanted to comment on the fact that despite all of that, there are still some wonderful examples of foster carers who keep in touch with the children they've worked with forever. For Brucefield, for example, will have young people back for Sunday lunch who've long since moved on. Glasgow Road and the other flats there often have young people who will keep back in touch. So although we need to get better, there are people who have consistently done that throughout.
Marie, did you have something to add to that?
It was just to cite the example of Brucefield. There's some lovely examples of young people who lived there getting into crisis and phoning Pauline and the staff there and them intervening directly, sometimes just to bring that young person in for an overnight, whether it's in Brucefield or Glasgow Road, to get that situation calmed and get them back on track. So there are some lovely examples of that, and we would continue to encourage that.
Yep, and that's a normal function of a family. Go back to them when you've got a crisis. So that's great to hear. Councillor Errol.
Yeah, thank you. It was just a question on the resource implications of this. So obviously we've got 50,000 at the moment for programme manager post for 1 year. I can't remember, to be honest with you, but I know we've discussed the financial arrangements here that's coming forward. But is that only having that allocated for 1 year? Does that present a problem, or for planning, or does it not? I suppose is my concern.
I'm happy to answer that. So I am the person employed in that post for 12 months. And I suppose from a personal point of view, yes, it poses a problem because there's an end point to my involvement in implementing what we can do within that time period. There is other funding that comes on stream sort of at intervals through the Promise Partnership. So we've had to put in bids for that. And it's extremely competitive, as you can imagine, with local authorities and also third sector agencies applying from all over the country for these limited pots of money. And they have all been 1 year funding provisions so far. Now, the next phase of the Promise nationally is going to involve hopefully a provider that will be able to fund for more longer periods of time or repeated years of funding. So we will hopefully move to a position of a bit more stability from that point of view, from the Promise Partnership funding. But you're right, it is difficult to really implement something in a sustainable way when you're working in that sort of environment. But what we're having to do is apply the human economic cost model and try to secure and rebalance our resources that we already do have towards that early intervention and staff development, to moving the money away from crisis and high tariff sort of interventions. So over time, we should see that that's the direction of travel, and it's a much more sustainable model.
Yeah, no, thanks, Morven. It just concerns me that it doesn't help us when it's just yearly allocation.
No, and we've fed that back to the Promise team, and that has been fed back, I know, through cohorts that I'm part of nationally, that's been fed back in very strong terms to the Scottish Government. We will see if they can respond to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marie, did you want to come in on that?
Just very briefly, to support that very comprehensive answer from Morven, and to say that we are being given a small amount of money for family support, which is a big thrust of the Promise, and that there is more money to come. We have been told, haven't quite been told what we've to spend on, but it would appear to be linked to poverty, Section 12, and basically supporting children to remain with their families in the community. So look forward to getting our allocation whenever that is. Thank you.
Okay. Any further points? Councillor Early, still got your hand up. You got something else? No. Okay. So we're asked to consider the contents of the Stirling Corporate Parent and Promise Plan. So we've done that. We agree that.
Agreed.
Sorry. Move on to item 17, and that's the Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report. Marie.
Okay, so thank you, Marie Valenti, Senior Manager, Children and Families and Justice. This report covers the financial year from 2020 to 2021. This is the 5th report that I have submitted to this committee for perusal and for scrutiny. It sets out the challenges that we faced over that time, and it describes how we responded to those challenges and what we achieved during what was a very difficult year. So the stresses of COVID-19 saw a rise in child protection cases and increased complexity of family problems. We prioritised these families and provided emotional and practical support amidst COVID conditions. Despite challenges, we continued our transformational work. Overall, the number of children accommodated is still slowly reducing, and we have seen an encouraging rise in kinship care, of which we are very proud. In justice social work, and Michael will say much more about this later, we prioritised those at highest risk amidst conditions that led to a reduction in court work and limited capacity for us to provide unpaid work to people. So we are now emerging from the pandemic. Key challenges that we currently face are staff recruitment and retention amidst ever-increasing demands post-COVID. I can say with some confidence that we will continue in our efforts to meet these demands through a strong extended leadership team, of which I am very proud and fortunate, and frontline staff that are totally committed to meeting the needs of those that need us most in Stirling. So again, I am very proud of those staff and very fortunate and privileged to have them within the workforce. So thank you, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Marie. I would absolutely echo what you've just said there about the staff. Things don't work if people don't give their best, and they absolutely do give their best. I just wanted to pick up one topic of the trauma champions, because I think this is, you know, trauma-informed approach is absolutely key, and getting that embedded. And I'm just wondering how that's going, and how much more is done in that area.
Okay, I am happy to answer that if that's, yeah, okay, yeah. So we have a number of trauma champions within the workforce, and Michael's put his hand up, which I'm really pleased about because he is one of them, and Morgan Graham is our other one. We're actively looking at recruiting more. And we have received monies for a post that will take a programme manager that will take forward that work throughout the organisation, so that that is embedded not just in children and families and justice, but is taken right throughout our corporate. So roads, waste, all of those parts of the organisation will become involved in that. And Michael's also done some interesting observations of Eastern Berkshire, looking at their premises. So there is work being done within the council on the new hybrid model and looking at our accommodation. So we're hoping to wire in all of that about trauma-informed soft furnishings, and a key message going out to people that they are valued and respected when they come into our buildings within the council. So significant amount of work being done. I think it will speed up when we get that programme manager in post, and we will certainly be working alongside that person to take all of that work forward. But I know Michael is much more involved in it than I, and has a keen interest in it.
Have you anything to add to that, Michael?
Yeah, I suppose just to reinforce everything that Marie has actually said. I think I've spoken in a number of forums now in relation to trauma-informed approach. And it's something that it's a whole council. In fact, it's a whole area response. The colleagues we speak to are colleagues actually within the NHS, with the Scottish Prison Service, as well as within Stirling Council. And I think the Scottish Prison Service in particular, and the development of what is currently now Corton Vale, but will be known as HMP Stirling. And obviously there's a rebuilding process going on there, but they're looking at that being a trauma-informed and gender-responsive setting for the women who are actually held there going forward. And I think that's a bit of a reflection on where we all need to be going. We need to be much more trauma-informed, and not just in the nation of practice, which goes without saying, but critically in the environment as well. And that we need to be sort of supporting people more effectively, and indeed sort of that's where this whole approach is coming from a national level. But yes, it's early days. We have the recruitment of an individual to help take this forward. We have a number of champions, but I have to say this is for the whole council. This is just not for children's and education and justice. Everybody's got a responsibility here. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll open up for if anybody has any questions. Councillor Cholamash.
Okay, thank you. So I have, the two questions about recruitment of, the foster carers, where we are with that at the moment. And the second question is about a self-directed support, because I imagine what's happened in the last few years has had the impact on that. So where are we with the rollout for self-directed support?
So I think Alex Bergen may want to talk about the recruitment of foster carers, and perhaps Mark can come in and talk about our services to children with disabilities that base self-directed support.
I can certainly speak to the recruitment of foster carers, and I think that Stirling has actually been in a very fortunate position throughout the pandemic in that has continued to recruit and assist foster carers during that time. It's also continuing with its programme of recruiting enhanced foster carers, which we look at as a direct alternative to potential residential resources for very vulnerable young people. We've just registered somebody in the last week, and we're hoping in the next few weeks to recruit a worker to the enhanced foster carers supporting supervising social worker post to continue to grow and support that service. So in that respect, things are going quite well. And in fact, we're slightly rebalancing the team to take account of the fact that we continue to keep children in their families where possible, so that we're also offering support to kinship carers to a comparable level to foster carers.
Okay, thanks. Mark, do you want to pick up the second half of that question?
Yeah, certainly. I'm aware, obviously, there was a briefing paper we put in just for the conveners of this committee just last year, just around about an SDS update. So long and short, I suppose, for a Stirling perspective, we're actually kind of regularly attending some of the national meetings around about the rollout of the self-directed support. There's a kind of self-directed support community of practice meeting. Generally, I think they're monthly. So our team leader and sometimes social workers will maybe try and make that to, be kept informed around about some of the best practice approaches. I think in Stirling, we still have we have SDS in place, but ultimately in terms of the options that families have, I believe it's still around about 30 families will use SDS option 1. So ultimately, it's about choice and giving people opportunity to inform the support that they want. And ultimately, it's part and parcel of that assessment and making sure that people are aware of the approach. I think what we have done as a service management team is recently kind of discussed some of the kind of topics that might be helpful for committees to hear about going forward over the next year or so. And I think SDS, Marie, I think that was maybe something you had mentioned, might be something that may be helpful to be included. And that might feature within a body of another report. So I think we maybe bring a paper around about our children with disability team in the service. We might be able to kind of give further comment around about where we are situated with SDS, but certainly linked in nationally and ultimately keen to hear around how other areas are implementing it and kind of using best practice examples for that.
Okay, thank you. Could you just say your job title, Mark?
Oh, sorry, apologies. Sorry, I'm Service Manager for Children and Family Social Work, South Locality and Children with Disability.
That's great, thanks. Alistair, Councillor Tolamash, your hand's still up. You got another question? Do you want to come back? No. Is there any further questions or comments? Councillor Simpson.
Yes, it's just about self-directed support. How much leeway do you have for more imaginative uses of the funding? If you get my meaning.
Well, I suppose there are the idea of that whole approach is to be innovative and flexible to meet and adapt to family circumstances. So we do have examples of individuals who are maybe employing, sometimes it's family members to provide care to reflect the fact that there's that care and responsibility. But within our own frameworks that we've just launched just in January there, it's around about giving families more choice and scope around about the services. So a lot of it's around about if people don't know there's things out there or these are the things that are open to them, they're maybe not going to opt in. Yeah, so I think I know Sheena is quite active in linking in with certainly those young people that are maybe transitioning into adult services. but our wider team is around about making sure that we are sharing the knowledge that the team has around about all the different things. And that's why the national meeting is really quite helpful, because we're maybe hearing about other local authority areas that are maybe experiencing things that are a little bit different. Yeah. And I suppose we will always be keen to say, right, well, is it something that Stirling could, promote, share knowledge of, so that actually the families can, get the better outcomes for themselves in terms of what's going to meet their needs. Yeah,
and feel as though they've got a bit of control.
Well, it's all about that choice and control, to be honest, because it's not about being done on two. It's about saying this is, a range of choices, and always keeping that range of options as wide as possible, because everybody's individual.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other points? No. So we've been asked to consider the contents of the report as pertaining to the Children, Family and Justice Social Work. So can we agree we've considered the contents? So on to item 18, and this is the Interim Justice Social Work Annual Report, and that's you, Michael.
Good afternoon, convener and everybody here. I'll just introduce myself, failed to do so previously. So I'm Michael Grasson, Justice Service Manager for Social Work Services here in Stirling. And thank you for the opportunity to provide an interim update report from the activities of Justice Social Work here in Stirling Council between the 1st of April 2021 up until the 31st of December. I have to advise as well, we're looking at actually having an annual report brought back to committee later in the year. We're looking at provisionally being sort of September, October time. But in the interim, we're just really wanting to provide the committee with an update with regards to the following sections. Our responses to COVID-19, which is still with us, but we've been dealing with now for coming on 2 years. Obviously, there's been ongoing health and safety sort of responses we've had to deal with. Subsequently, we've had to prioritise how we're actually working with the people who are subject to community sentences in prison through care and so forth. There was the introduction of the Coronavirus Scotland Act 2020, which brought on significant changes in relation to the delivery of justice in Scotland, and that's something that's still having some impact, though obviously that's a changing scenario. We have actually received additional funding and for pandemic recovery work, and that has been extended into the next financial year. And that then starts to help us to look at sort of future responses. I've laid out the report in a way that follows the Justice Social Work journey from pre-court activity all the way through to prison through care. So that's taken in all of our court work and community sentences, as well as how we support individuals coming out of custody. It also mentions briefly about prison-based social work units that we have in Corton Vale, and there's significant changes actually happening there, as people can see. But we've also submitted a proposal to the Scottish Prison Service and the Scottish Government in relation to how we think we can develop our prison-based social work services actually within that setting. And we're now in the process and be able to sort of develop further services, and we're looking in the coming weeks, quite frankly, about bail supervision being available for the local courts, as well as structured deferred sentences, and all of which needs to be captured through a trauma-informed approach, which obviously we've discussed earlier on today. I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I've just got one really. It was about pleased to see you've now got a part-time psychiatric nurse. Is that a permanent position?
Yes, that is a permanent position, and we've actually managed to secure that position through specific Action 15 monies that came through to us through the Scottish Government. So we actually have our CPM with us 2 days a week, and that's something that we link in with colleagues through NHS Forth Valley. But no, that's a very welcome additional resource.
Yeah, and is that enough 2 days a week? Is there room to expand that maybe in the future?
I think probably sort of, I don't know if there's funding to expand it. That'd be probably sort of like once in a while to look at. I think as well, though, it's about access to mainstream provision, which is the challenge. I think that's where we really want to see. And I would suggest it's not just about mental health services, but I think access to mainstream provision for a range of services is often a challenge for people within the justice system. And indeed, actually, much of our time is taken up trying to support access for the people who use our services, where actually ordinarily it should just be there as a given. But obviously, sort of, we have no control over the mental health services within the NHS.
Mm-hmm. And that'll be absolutely worse after the pandemic, you know.
It's something we certainly need to actually sort of keep on keeping an eye on, without a doubt, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I'll open up for questions then, Councillor Simpson.
Thanks. What about addiction services? Because presumably addiction services would need to be in there more often than twice a week.
Well, we do actually have addiction services being provided predominantly through drug treatment and testing orders, which we actually have staff who are working alongside colleagues from Treatment Alcohol and Drug Service. We also link in with Change Grow Live, one of the third sector organisations, and we actually have a member of the recovery community embedded within our staffing group 1 day a week, and that's something we're hoping to further develop as we move forward. So I think that access to substance misuse services is something that we're probably sort of like, you know, in a better position than we were, say, 18 months ago, when an awful lot of services seemed to be fairly limited, and indeed it felt at times we were probably amongst the most active out and about meeting with clients. But we are seeing services opening up, and then obviously it made mention as well to drug-related deaths. This is an area of activity that we're wanting to further develop and reduce the harm that's caused by all substances.
Thank you. And you get good support from the NHS, do you?
I would suggest that we work well with the NHS. I think that there's challenges there and continue to be challenges. But I think we've got a long-standing working relationship with NHS Forth Valley. And I think that certainly helps us in many ways. But I do sort of think that there's significant challenges for treatment services nationally. If we looked actually at the drug-related deaths national report, what it did flag up was actually that we have a lower proportion of people in treatment than elsewhere within the UK. So that's a challenge for the NHS as a whole. And indeed, I was speaking this week both with the ADP coordinator and the Community Justice Board coordinator, and we're looking at how we can try and progress actually access to treatment services, be it harm reduction or be it residential, at points of contact within the justice system. So that's something that we're actually progressing through the Community Justice Board as well as the Alcohol and Drug Partnership.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, any other points? No. So we've been asked to note the contents of the report, and have we agreed we've noted the report. So that then brings us to the end of the committee and the end of this cycle of committees. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's taken part, for all the officers' hard work and the staff's hard work, and for all the reports and the presentations, and the quite varied presentations, and even our little four-legged friend that we had some time ago. So it's been a privilege to be the convener of this committee, and we'll have maybe new faces around the table in the next administration. So, so thanks to everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks, Susan.